Buffalo Bills, the 4 Super Bowl losses, 1990 to 93. For Buffalo fans, nothing stings more than the early 1990s. The Bills were one of the most dominant teams of that era, reaching 4 straight Super Bowls from 1990 to 1993. Led by Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and Bruce Smith, they had the talent to cement themselves as a dynasty. Instead, those 4 years came to define heartbreak. The most painful of the 4 came first. On January 27, 1991, in Super Bowl 25 against the New York Giants, the Bills trailed 20-19 in the final seconds. With 8 seconds left, kicker Scott Norwood lined up for a 47-yard field goal that could have won Buffalo its first championship. The kick sailed wide right, and the Giants escaped with the victory. Wide right became the defining phrase of Bills football for a generation. The next 3 Super Bowls didn't bring redemption. Buffalo was blown out by Washington in Super Bowl 26, and then humiliated by Dallas in back-to-back years, including a 52-17 defeat in Super Bowl 27. Despite their dominance in the AFC, the Bills left the early 90s with no rings to show for it. Miami Dolphins, Super Bowl 17 collapse. For Miami fans, the early 1980s brought one of the most painful what-ifs in franchise history. The Dolphins had already been crowned Super Bowl champions in the early 1970s, during Don Shula's dynasty, and by the 1982 season, they were ready to return to glory. In Super Bowl 17 on January 30th, 1983, the Dolphins faced Washington. Miami struck first in a big way, jumping out to a 17-0 lead. Their defense, nicknamed the Killer Bees, looked dominant, and it seemed as if the Lombardi Trophy was heading back to South Florida. But then, momentum flipped. Washington chipped away at the lead, tying the game in the third quarter. Early in the fourth, with the score knotted at 17, came the play Dolphins fans still remember with a grimace. On 4th and 1, Washington running back John Riggins broke free for a 43-yard touchdown run, dragging Miami cornerback Don McNeil with him before sprinting untouched to the end zone. That run didn't just give Washington the lead, it crushed Miami's spirit. Washington scored 27 unanswered points in total, winning 27-17. The Dolphins' early lead and eventual collapse remained seared into the memory of the fan base. Losing a Super Bowl is always painful, but blowing a 2-touchdown advantage in the biggest game of the year made it devastating. For a generation of Miami fans, that loss symbolized wasted opportunity, especially since Shula wouldn't win another championship despite later drafting Dan Marino. New England Patriots, Super Bowl 42, the 18-1 season. For Patriots fans, no loss will ever sting more than February 3rd, 2008. New England entered Super Bowl 42 against the New York Giants as heavy favorites. They weren't just undefeated, they were chasing history. At 18-0, Tom Brady, Randy Moss, and Bill Belichick had put together one of the greatest seasons ever. A win would have capped off the NFL's first perfect season since the 1972 Dolphins. The game, however, didn't go according to script. The Giants' relentless pass rush harassed Brady all night, and the Patriots' offense never found its usual rhythm. Still, with just under 3 minutes left, Brady found Moss for a touchdown to take a 14-10 lead. It felt like destiny was finally within reach. But then came one of the most famous drives in NFL history. Giants quarterback Eli Manning, facing 3rd and 5, somehow escaped a sure sack and hurled a desperate pass downfield. Wide receiver David Tyree went up and made the miraculous helmet catch, pinning the ball against his helmet as Rodney Harrison dragged him down. The improbable 32-yard gain kept the drive alive. Moments later, Manning hit Plaxico Burress for the go-ahead touchdown with just 35 seconds left. The Giants won 17-14, handing the Patriots their only loss of the season on the biggest stage of all. For New England, the defeat was devastating. Instead of immortality as the greatest team ever, they became 18-1, remembered as much for falling short as for their dominance. New York Jets, the butt fumble, 2012. Thanksgiving night, November 22nd, 2012, became one of the most infamous evenings in Jets history. And it wasn't because of the turkey. In front of a national audience on primetime television, the Jets hosted the New England Patriots in what quickly turned into a disaster. Early in the second quarter, trailing 14-0, Jets quarterback Mark Sanchez took a snap and attempted a broken handoff. Unsure where to go, he scrambled forward, straight into the backside of his own offensive lineman, Brandon Moore. The collision knocked Sanchez to the turf, the ball popped loose, and the Patriots scooped it up for a touchdown. The play was instantly dubbed the butt fumble, and it symbolized the Jets' struggles in one humiliating moment. New England went on to rout New York 49-19 in a blowout that compounded the embarrassment. For Jets fans, the sight of their quarterback running into his own teammate's rear end and fumbling on national TV became the defining lowlight of the 2012 season. What made the butt fumble sting even more was how it lived on. ESPN replayed it for months, and it became a viral clip replayed endlessly in blooper reels. It even won Worst of the Worst on SportsCenter's Not Top 10 countdown for 40 consecutive weeks before being retired from the list. Baltimore Ravens, 2018 wildcard loss versus Chargers. For Ravens fans, the 2018 postseason was supposed to be the dawn of a new era. Rookie quarterback Lamar Jackson had electrified the league after taking over midway through the season, leading Baltimore to a 6-1 finish down the stretch and an AFC North title. With the playoffs back in Baltimore, optimism was high. On January 6, 2019, the Ravens hosted the Los Angeles Chargers in the wild card round. Having just beaten LA a few weeks earlier, many believed Baltimore's stout defense and Jackson's dynamic running would carry them to the next round. What unfolded became one of the more painful memories in recent Ravens history. The Chargers, led by veteran quarterback Philip Rivers, came prepared with a new defensive scheme. They frequently used 7 defensive backs on the field to counter Jackson's running ability, clogging up lanes and forcing him into uncomfortable passing situations. The Ravens' offense sputtered, and by the fourth quarter, they trailed 23-3. Baltimore finally mounted a rally late, as Jackson threw 2 touchdown passes to cut the lead to 23-17. With just over a minute remaining, the Ravens had the ball with a chance to complete the comeback, but Jackson was strip-sacked, and the fumble sealed the game for Los Angeles. Though Lamar Jackson would go on to win MVP the very next season, this game remains a reminder of the growing pains of that era. Cincinnati Bengals, 2015 wildcard collapse versus Steelers. Few playoff losses in NFL history have been as painful and self-inflicted as what happened to the Bengals on January 9th, 2016. Hosting the rival Pittsburgh Steelers in the wildcard round, Cincinnati was trying to end decades of frustration. They hadn't won a playoff game since 1990. This matchup seemed like the perfect chance to finally change that narrative. The game itself was an emotional roller coaster. In a cold, rainy slugfest, tempers flared from the start. Late in the fourth quarter, it looked like Cincinnati was finally about to exercise their playoff demons. Trailing 15-0 entering the fourth quarter, they stormed back. With just 1 minute and 50 seconds left to play, running back Jeremy Hill powered into the end zone to give the Bengals a 16-15 lead. When Vontaze Burfict intercepted Ben Roethlisberger shortly afterward, Paul Brown Stadium erupted. It seemed like Cincinnati had their long-awaited playoff victory secured, but in just a few minutes, it all unraveled. On the very next offensive play, Hill fumbled the ball, giving the Steelers life. Roethlisberger, injured earlier in the game, returned to lead a desperate drive. With less than 30 seconds left, Burfict delivered a crushing hit to Antonio Brown that drew a 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness. As if that wasn't bad enough, Bengals cornerback Adam Packman-Jones was flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct during the same sequence, handing Pittsburgh an additional 15 yards. In the blink of an eye, the Steelers were in field goal range. Kicker Chris Boswell drilled a 35-yard field goal with just 14 seconds remaining, giving Pittsburgh an improbable 18-16 win. Bengals players and fans were left stunned, watching what felt like certain victory dissolve into chaos. Cleveland Browns, The Drive. 1986 AFC Championship. For Browns fans, no moment embodies heartbreak more than The Drive. On January 11th, 1987, Cleveland hosted the Denver Broncos in the AFC Championship game at Municipal Stadium. The Browns were just minutes away from their first ever Super Bowl appearance. With just over 5 minutes left, Cleveland led 20-13. Denver quarterback John Elway and the Broncos offense took over, but they were pinned at their own 2-yard line. What happened next has haunted Cleveland for decades. Elway orchestrated a legendary 98-yard march against the Browns' defense. He converted critical third downs, scrambled to extend plays, and picked apart Cleveland with clutch throws. The defining moment came with just 37 seconds left, a touchdown pass to Mark Jackson to tie the game at 20-20. In overtime, the Broncos sealed it with a 33-yard field goal. Victory had been within reach, only to slip away in the final minutes. Pittsburgh Steelers, Super Bowl 45 loss to the Packers, 2011. For a franchise that prides itself on championship tradition, few losses cut deeper for Steelers fans than February 6th, 2011. In Super Bowl 45, Pittsburgh had the chance to add a 7th Lombardi trophy to their record collection. The opponent was the Green Bay Packers, led by Aaron Rodgers, who was still chasing his first ring. Early on, things spiraled quickly. The Packers jumped out to a 21-3 lead, capitalizing on a Ben Roethlisberger interception, returned for a touchdown and another short field score. The Steelers clawed their way back, cutting the lead to 21-17 in the third quarter. Behind Rashard Mendenhall's touchdown run, Hines Ward and Mike Wallace kept making plays. And for a moment, it looked like Pittsburgh might pull off another comeback. But disaster struck again. Early in the fourth quarter, with Pittsburgh driving, Mendenhall fumbled. Green Bay recovered, and Rodgers wasted no time capitalizing, hitting Greg Jennings for a touchdown. The Steelers couldn't recover, and despite a late score to make it close, the Packers held on for a 31-25 victory. In the years since, the Steelers haven't returned to the big game. Houston Texans, 2019 playoff collapse versus Chiefs. For Texans fans, no moment stings more than January 12, 2020, when their team suffered one of the worst collapses in playoff history. It was the AFC divisional round, and Houston was on the road in Kansas City facing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Early on, everything went right. The Texans stunned Arrowhead Stadium by storming out to a 24-0 lead midway through the second quarter. Deshaun Watson was making plays, the defense was forcing mistakes, and it looked like Houston was on the verge of pulling off a monumental upset that would send them to the AFC Championship game for the first time in franchise history. Then, the collapse began. The Chiefs answered with a quick touchdown and immediately followed it up by blocking a Texans punt and returning it for another score. A failed Houston fake punt gave Mahomes a short field, and soon after, the lead was gone. In just a matter of minutes, the Chiefs had turned a 24-point deficit into a halftime lead. From there, Kansas City never looked back. Mahomes threw 5 touchdown passes, and the Chiefs scored 41 unanswered points. The final score was 51-31, with Houston left stunned. One moment they were up 4 scores, and the next they were completely overwhelmed. Many considered it the franchise's defining low point, a reminder of wasted potential during the Watson era. For Kansas City, it was the beginning of a Super Bowl run. For Houston, it was the collapse that still haunts the fan base. Indianapolis Colts, Super Bowl III upset. For Colts fans, especially those who still remember the team's Baltimore days, nothing was more painful than Super Bowl III. On January 12, 1969, the Colts entered the game as overwhelming favorites against the upstart AFL champion New York Jets. Baltimore had finished the regular season 13-1 and demolished the Browns in the NFL championship game. Odds makers made them 18-point favorites, and many believed the Jets had no chance. But history had other plans. Jets quarterback Joe Namath famously guaranteed victory before the game, and his team backed it up. The Colts, led by legendary quarterback Johnny Unitas, though still recovering from injury, and Earl Morrall, looked out of sync from the start. Mistakes piled up, including costly interceptions, and Baltimore could never find its rhythm. Meanwhile, the Jets played efficient, mistake-free football. Running back Matt Snell carried 30 times for 121 yards and a touchdown, while kicker Jim Turner added 3 field goals. Namath didn't even throw a touchdown pass, but he controlled the game with confidence and precision. The final score was 16-7 Jets, a stunning upset that instantly became one of the most iconic moments in NFL history. It validated the AFL's legitimacy and set the stage for the AFL-NFL merger. For the Colts, however, it was a humiliating defeat. Instead of cementing themselves as one of the greatest teams of all time, they became the answer to a trivia question. The NFL powerhouse that got shocked by Namath's Jets. Jacksonville Jaguars. 1999 AFC Championship loss and years of futility. For Jaguars fans, the high watermark of the franchise came shockingly early, and the fall from it has been long and painful. Founded as an expansion team in 1995, Jacksonville quickly found success under head coach Tom Coughlin, making the playoffs 4 times in their first 5 years. By the 1999 season, they looked unstoppable. The Jaguars finished 14-2, boasting the NFL's best record, powered by quarterback Mark Brunell, running back Fred Taylor, and a ferocious defense led by Tony Brackens and Kevin Hardy. They won their 2 playoff games handily, setting up an AFC Championship showdown against the Tennessee Titans, a team they had lost to twice that regular season. Fans believed this was finally their year, but in front of a raucous Jacksonville crowd on January 23, 2000, disaster struck. After holding a slim halftime lead, the Jaguars completely unraveled. Titans quarterback Steve McNair and running back Eddie George dominated the second half, and special teams icon Derek Mason broke free for a kickoff return touchdown. The Titans outscored Jacksonville 23-0 in the second half, winning 33-14. The pain was doubled by context. Jacksonville's magical season ended against the one team they couldn't beat, Tennessee. In fact, all 3 of their losses that season came to the Titans. What made this loss so devastating is what followed. Jacksonville didn't return to the AFC Championship for over 17 years, enduring long stretches of losing seasons, coaching changes, and roster rebuilds. The franchise even hit rock bottom in 2020 with a 1-15 record, the worst in team history. Tennessee Titans, Super Bowl 34, 1 yard short. Few moments in NFL history capture heartbreak more perfectly than the ending of Super Bowl 34. On January 30th, 2000, the Tennessee Titans, just a year removed from being the Houston Oilers, had a chance to make history. Behind quarterback Steve McNair and running back Eddie George, the Titans rallied from a 16-point deficit against the high-powered St. Louis Rams, known as the greatest show on turf. With just 6 seconds left, Tennessee trailed 23-16 and had the ball on the Rams' 10-yard line. McNair fired a quick slant pass to wide receiver Kevin Dyson. Dyson caught it in stride and sprinted toward the end zone. For a split second, it looked like the Titans were about to tie the game and send it to overtime. But Rams linebacker Mike Jones made a perfect game-saving tackle. He wrapped Dyson just short of the goal line, dragging him down at the 1-yard line as time expired. The image of Dyson stretching his arm desperately toward the end zone, falling just shy, remains one of the most iconic visuals in Super Bowl history. The Titans lost 23-16. For the franchise, it was both a breakthrough and a heartbreak. Their first Super Bowl appearance, decided by literal inches. For fans, the pain has lingered for decades. Tennessee has made playoff runs since, but has never returned to the Super Bowl. Denver Broncos, Super Bowl 48 blowout versus Seahawks. For Broncos fans, the memory of February 2nd, 2014 remains a painful one. Denver entered Super Bowl 48 in New Jersey with one of the most prolific offenses the NFL had ever seen. Peyton Manning had just broken single-season records for passing yards, 5,477, and touchdowns, 55. The Broncos finished 13-3, steamrolled the AFC, and were favored to take home the Lombardi Trophy. But against the Seattle Seahawks, it all went wrong from the very first play. On the game's opening snap, a miscommunication on the offensive line led to the ball sailing past Manning into the end zone for a safety. Just 12 seconds into the game, Denver trailed 2-0, and things unraveled from there. Seattle's ferocious Legion of Boom defense overwhelmed Manning and the Broncos receivers, suffocating an offense that had looked unstoppable all season. By halftime, it was 22-0. Percy Harvin returned the second half kickoff 87 yards for a touchdown, and Seattle never looked back. At one point, the Seahawks led 36-0, completely dominating all 3 phases of the game. The final score was 43-8. One of the most lopsided results in Super Bowl history. For Denver, it was an embarrassment, not just a loss, but a complete dismantling on the biggest stage, with the whole country watching. Broncos fans had endured blowout defeats in earlier Super Bowls in the 1980s, but this one was different. Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl, 1 loss to the Packers. For the Kansas City Chiefs, the roots of their fan base's pain stretch all the way back to the very first Super Bowl. On January 15, 1967, the Chiefs, champions of the AFL, faced Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers, champions of the NFL, in the inaugural AFL-NFL World Championship game, what would soon be known as the Super Bowl. At the time, many NFL loyalists viewed the AFL as inferior. Chiefs fans believed their team, led by quarterback Len Dawson, running back Mike Garrett, and defensive stars like Bobby Bell and Buck Buchanan, could prove otherwise. In the first half, Kansas City actually kept pace. They trailed just 14-10 at halftime, and momentum seemed within reach. But the second half belonged to Green Bay. Dawson was intercepted by Willie Wood early in the third quarter, setting up a Packers touchdown. From there, the floodgates opened. Bart Starr, the Packers' legendary quarterback, controlled the game with efficiency, while Green Bay's defense completely shut down Kansas City's explosive offense. The Packers ran away with it, winning 35-10. For Chiefs fans, it was painful not just because of the loss, but because of what it represented. Their team had been carrying the flag for the AFL, and the defeat only fueled the perception that the AFL wasn't on the same level as the NFL. The sting lingered until the Chiefs redeemed themselves 3 years later, beating the Minnesota Vikings in Super Bowl IV. Las Vegas Raiders, franchise relocations. For Raiders fans, some of the most painful moments haven't come on the field. They've come from watching their team move away. Few franchises in sports have such a complicated relationship with their cities, and few fan bases have felt that heartbreak more than the Raiders. The story begins in Oakland, where the Raiders were founded in 1960 as a charter member of the AFL. The team quickly became known for its rebellious identity, with Al Davis building a culture of toughness and swagger. The Raiders built one of the most loyal fan bases in the NFL, Raider Nation, deeply rooted in the East Bay. But in 1982, Davis relocated the team to Los Angeles. For Oakland fans, it was devastating. The Silver and Black became an LA team, winning Super Bowl XVIII just 2 years later, in 1984. While Los Angeles embraced the team, many Oakland fans felt abandoned, left behind, despite decades of loyalty. In 1995, the Raiders returned to Oakland after 13 years in LA. The reunion was emotional. Raider Nation had its team back, and the Coliseum again became home to the league's rowdiest fans. For a time, it seemed the wounds had healed, but financial disputes, stadium issues, and the lure of a bigger market eventually led to another painful move. In 2020, the Raiders relocated again, this time to Las Vegas. The move was a crushing blow for Oakland, a city that had already lost the Warriors to San Francisco, and was watching the A's explore leaving as well. Raider Nation remains fiercely loyal, traveling in droves to Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, but the move left Oakland fans heartbroken for a second time. Dallas Cowboys, the Ice Bowl. For Cowboys fans, few games in franchise history sting more than the legendary Ice Bowl. On December 31st, 1967, Dallas faced the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field in the NFL Championship. A trip to Super Bowl II was on the line, and the conditions were brutal. The temperature at kickoff was minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 26 degrees Celsius, with a wind chill near minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, making it one of the coldest games ever played in NFL history. The Cowboys, led by quarterback Don Meredith and head coach Tom Landry, battled Green Bay's dynasty team, led by Vince Lombardi. It was a defensive struggle on frozen turf, with players slipping on ice and breath turning instantly to frost. Late in the fourth quarter, Dallas mounted a drive and took a 17-14 lead after a touchdown pass by Dan Reeves. It looked like the Cowboys might finally overcome Green Bay and advance to their first Super Bowl. But Packers quarterback Bart Starr engineered one of the most famous drives in football history. With just seconds left and the ball at the 1-yard line, Starr executed a quarterback sneak behind guard Jerry Kramer, plunging into the end zone for the winning touchdown. Green Bay won 21-17, and the Cowboys' championship hopes were frozen on the goal line. The image of Starr diving into the end zone remains iconic, but for Cowboys fans, it's a snapshot of one of the most painful defeats in team history. New York Giants, the miracle at the Meadowlands. For Giants fans, the single most painful and embarrassing moment in franchise history came on December 10th, 1978, in what became known as the Miracle at the Meadowlands. The Giants were hosting their division rival Philadelphia Eagles at Giants Stadium. With less than 30 seconds left, New York held a 17-12 lead. Philadelphia had no timeouts remaining, meaning all the Giants had to do was kneel and run out the clock. Victory was secure, or so it seemed. Instead, Giants offensive coordinator Bob Gibson called for a running play, and quarterback Joe Pisarcik attempted to hand off to running back Larry Csonka. The exchange went horribly wrong. Pisarcik fumbled the handoff, and Eagles cornerback Herman Edwards scooped up the loose ball. He sprinted 26 yards untouched into the end zone for the winning touchdown. In a matter of seconds, the Giants went from certain victory to a 19-17 defeat. The play was immediately infamous, with Giants fans in disbelief at how their team had managed to lose. It became a turning point not just for the franchise, but for the NFL as a whole. The embarrassment was so complete that the Giants' coaching staff was overhauled, and the play directly influenced the league-wide adoption of the victory formation, the quarterback kneel down we see today to safely end games. Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl 39 loss to the Patriots. For Eagles fans, the pain of February 6, 2005 still lingers. After years of near misses under head coach Andy Reid and quarterback Donovan McNabb, Philadelphia had finally broken through to reach Super Bowl 39. With stars like wide receiver Terrell Owens, who was playing heroically just weeks after breaking his leg, and safety Brian Dawkins, this felt like the Eagles' moment to bring home their first Lombardi trophy. Facing Tom Brady and the New England Patriots dynasty, the game was tightly contested. Philadelphia's defense kept them in it, forcing New England to grind for every yard. By the third quarter, the Eagles actually held a lead. For a fan base starved for a championship, the dream was alive. But then, the tide turned. The Patriots rallied, scoring 10 straight points to take a 24-14 lead in the fourth quarter. McNabb responded with a touchdown to cut it to 24-21, but the Eagles' offense struggled with pace, criticized afterward for huddling and moving too slowly in crunch time. On their final drive, McNabb threw an interception that sealed the game, and Philadelphia's title hopes slipped away. The loss was devastating because the Eagles had been so close. They had finally cleared the hurdle of NFC Championship heartbreak, losing 3 straight from 2001 to 2003, only to fall short on the biggest stage. Owens' valiant effort, 9 catches for 122 yards on an injured leg, became legendary. But it wasn't enough. Washington Commanders, Super Bowl 18, humiliation. For Washington fans, the bitterest defeat came on January 22, 1984, in Super Bowl 18 against the Los Angeles Raiders. The year before, Washington had won Super Bowl 17 and returned as defending champions after a record-setting 1983 season in which they went 14-2 and set the then NFL record for points scored, 541. Led by head coach Joe Gibbs, quarterback Joe Theismann, and running back John Riggins, they were heavy favorites. Instead, the game turned into a nightmare. The Raiders stunned Washington with big plays from the start. The defining moment came late in the first half. With Washington backed up at its own 12-yard line and trailing 14-3, Theismann's screen pass was intercepted by linebacker Jack Squirek, who walked untouched into the end zone for a pick 6. That gave Los Angeles a 21-3 halftime lead and completely broke Washington's spirit. Things only got worse after halftime. Raiders running back Marcus Allen delivered one of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history, reversing field on a broken run and sprinting 74 yards for a touchdown. By the time it was over, the Raiders had routed Washington 38-9, one of the most lopsided Super Bowl defeats ever. Chicago Bears, Super Bowl 41 loss to the Colts. For Bears fans, February 4th, 2007 was supposed to be a night of celebration, their first Super Bowl appearance since the dominant 1985 championship team. Head coach Lovie Smith had led Chicago to a 13-3 record, and the defense, anchored by Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, and Charles Tillman, looked like one of the league's best. The Bears also had Devin Hester, the most dangerous return man in football, who had electrified the league all season. Super Bowl 41 in Miami started perfectly. On the opening kickoff, Hester took the ball back 92 yards for a touchdown, becoming the first player in Super Bowl history to return the opening kick for a score. Bears fans erupted, dreaming of a magical night. But after that, things fell apart. Rain poured down, creating slick conditions, and quarterback Rex Grossman struggled. Though the Bears kept it close through the first half, trailing just 22-17 in the third quarter, their offense stalled completely after halftime. Grossman threw 2 costly interceptions, including one returned for a touchdown by Kelvin Hayden that sealed the game. Meanwhile, Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts slowly wore down the Bears' defense. Manning, who had faced criticism for playoff struggles, finally delivered, completing 25 passes for 247 yards and a touchdown. The Colts controlled the ball, controlled the clock, and pulled away for a 29-17 victory. For Chicago fans, the pain came from the sense of a wasted opportunity. The defense was championship caliber. Many still view it as the Bears' best chance at another Super Bowl title in the modern era, only to watch it slip away in frustrating fashion. The Bears haven't returned to the Super Bowl since. Detroit Lions, the 0-16 season. For Lions fans, the low point of the franchise came in 2008, when Detroit became the first team in NFL history to finish a season 0-16. The Lions entered the year with little optimism after years of poor drafts and losing records, but no one imagined just how bad things would get. Quarterbacks Dan Orlovsky, John Kitna, and Dante Culpepper all took turns starting, and the offense sputtered while the defense collapsed week after week. There were moments of near relief, a couple of games where the Lions were competitive late, but each time they found a way to lose. One of the season's defining lowlights came in Week 6 against the Vikings, when Orlovsky, scrambling in his own end zone, accidentally ran out of bounds, stepping on the back line for a safety. It became an infamous clip, replayed as a symbol of the Lions' futility. By the end of December, Detroit had lost all 16 games, often by blowout margins. The final record, 0-16, with opponents outscoring them by over 250 points. It was the first winless season in modern NFL history and set a standard of futility no fan base wants to endure. The humiliation ran deep. Longtime fans, who had already endured decades without a championship, were forced to live through a season where their team couldn't manage a single win. Ownership and management faced immense backlash, and the franchise had to completely reset. Green Bay Packers, 2007 NFC Championship loss to the Giants. For Packers fans, January 20th, 2008 remains one of the coldest and most painful nights in Lambeau Field history. Green Bay hosted the New York Giants in the NFC Championship game, with the winner heading to Super Bowl 42. It was bitterly cold, with the temperature at kickoff of frigid -1 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind chill plunging to -23 degrees Fahrenheit. The Packers had been revitalized that season behind quarterback Brett Favre, who seemed to be writing one last great chapter in his storied Green Bay career. Facing Eli Manning and the underdog Giants, the Packers were favored to win at home in the brutal conditions. But the game turned into a slugfest. The Giants controlled the line of scrimmage, pounding the ball with running backs Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, while Manning, despite the weather, played mistake-free football. Favre and the Packers kept it close. With the score tied 20-20 late in the fourth quarter, the Giants had 2 chances to win it with field goals, but kicker Lawrence Tynes missed both, sending the game to overtime. In OT, Packers fans believed Favre would deliver another Lambeau miracle. Instead, disaster struck. On Green Bay's first possession, Favre threw an interception to Corey Webster, giving the Giants the ball deep in Packers territory. This time, Tynes didn't miss. His 47-yard field goal sailed through the uprights, giving New York a stunning 23-20 victory. The loss crushed Green Bay. It ended Favre's tenure with the Packers. He would be traded months later to the Jets, and robbed the franchise of what felt like a golden Super Bowl opportunity. Adding to the sting, the Giants went on to shock the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl, a chance that many Packers fans believed could have been theirs. Minnesota Vikings, 1998 NFC Championship missed kick. For Vikings fans, no single moment captures heartbreak more than January 17, 1999. in the NFC Championship game against the Atlanta Falcons. The 1998 Vikings had been historic. They went 15-1, set a then NFL record with 556 points scored, and featured a high-powered offense with Randall Cunningham, Chris Carter, and rookie phenom Randy Moss. Many believed this was the year Minnesota would finally break through to win its first Super Bowl. Hosting the Falcons at the Metrodome, the Vikings led for much of the game. Late in the fourth quarter, ahead 27-20, they had a chance to seal the victory with a field goal. Kicker Gary Anderson, who had been perfect all season, 35 of 35 on field goals, lined up for a 38-yarder that would have given Minnesota a 10-point lead with less than 3 minutes to play. Anderson's kick sailed wide left. It was his first and only miss of the season, and it couldn't have come at a worse time. The Falcons seized the momentum, driving down the field to tie the game at 27-27. In overtime, Atlanta kicker Morton Anderson hit the game winner, sending the Falcons to the Super Bowl and leaving the Vikings stunned. For Minnesota fans, the pain of that miss is still raw. The 1998 Vikings were arguably the best team in franchise history, and yet they never got the chance to play for the Lombardi Trophy. Instead, they were remembered for one of the most infamous missed kicks in NFL history. Atlanta Falcons, the 28-3 collapse. For Falcons fans, there is no scar deeper than February 5th, 2017. In Super Bowl 51, Atlanta faced Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. For nearly 3 quarters, it looked like the franchise was about to win its first Lombardi Trophy in stunning fashion. Midway through the third quarter, the Falcons led 28-3. Quarterback Matt Ryan was playing brilliantly. The defense was forcing turnovers, and running backs Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman were gashing New England. With just over 20 minutes left in the game, Falcons fans were already daring to celebrate. But then came the collapse, the most infamous in NFL history. Brady led the Patriots on one scoring drive after another, while Atlanta's offense inexplicably stalled. Critical mistakes doomed the Falcons. A missed block that led to a Ryan strip sack. Questionable play calling that took them out of field goal range when a simple kick might have sealed the game. And a defense that couldn't get off the field. New England stormed back, scoring 25 unanswered points to tie the game at 28-28, forcing the first overtime in Super Bowl history. By then, momentum was completely gone. The Patriots won the coin toss, drove straight down the field, and James White scored the game-winning touchdown. Final score, 34-28 Patriots. Atlanta became the punchline of NFL jokes, forever tied to the number 28-3. Carolina Panthers, Super Bowl 50 loss to the Broncos. For Panthers fans, the most painful moment came on February 7, 2016, in Super Bowl 50. Carolina had just finished a magical 2015 season, going 15-1 behind MVP quarterback Cam Newton. They had the league's number, one offense, a dominant defense led by Luke Kuechly and Josh Norman, and a swagger that made them look unstoppable. Many believed it was finally the year the Panthers would hoist their first Lombardi Trophy. But on the game's biggest stage, their dream unraveled. Facing Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos, the Panthers were smothered by Denver's relentless pass rush. Von Miller and the Broncos' defense overwhelmed Carolina's offensive line, sacking Newton 7 times and forcing multiple turnovers. The defining play came in the fourth quarter. With Carolina trailing 16-10, Newton dropped back to pass and was stripped by Miller. As the ball bounced on the turf, Newton hesitated and didn't dive on it. Denver recovered, scored shortly after, and effectively put the game out of reach. That moment, Newton's hesitation, became the lasting image of the night, unfairly overshadowing the incredible season he had put together. The Broncos went on to win 24-10, and Carolina's historic run ended in disappointment. For fans, it was crushing, not just because of the loss, but because of how dominant the team had been all season, only to collapse when it mattered most. New Orleans Saints, the 2018 NFC Championship no call. For Saints fans, no moment in franchise history has ever felt as cruel as what happened on January 20th, 2019 in the NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams. With a trip to the Super Bowl on the line, New Orleans had battled all season behind Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, and Alvin Kamara, earning the number 1 seed and home field advantage at the raucous Superdome. Late in the fourth quarter, with the score tied 20-20, the Saints were driving into field goal range. On 3rd and 10, Breeze threw toward receiver Tommy Lee Lewis, who was leveled by Rams cornerback Nicole Roby-Coleman well before the ball arrived. It was an obvious case of pass interference, helmet-to-helmet contact with no attempt to play the ball. But the officials never threw a flag. The no call forced New Orleans to settle for a field goal, giving them a 23-20 lead with less than 2 minutes left. The Rams tied the game on their next drive and eventually won 26-23 in overtime on a 57-yard field goal by Greg Zuerlein. The aftermath was immediate and furious. Saints fans were outraged, flooding the NFL with complaints. Even neutral viewers agreed it was one of the most blatant missed calls in league history. The play sparked lawsuits in New Orleans, mass protests by Saints fans, and endless debate across the sports world. The NFL later admitted the officials missed the call, and in response, the league temporarily allowed pass interference to be reviewable by replay, a rule change that was directly born from this moment. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 0-26 start. For Buccaneers fans, the team's painful beginning still stands as the ultimate low point. When the franchise joined the NFL in 1976, optimism ran high that expansion football would bring excitement to Tampa Bay. Instead, it brought misery. The Buccaneers lost all 14 games in their inaugural 1976 season, setting a record for futility. They didn't just lose, they were dominated. The offense failed to score a single touchdown until Week 4, and the team was shut out 5 times. Head coach John McKay, who had come from powerhouse USC, grew so frustrated he delivered cutting one-liners to the media, famously saying, "I'm in favor of it," when asked about his team's execution. The struggles carried into 1977. Tampa Bay started the year with 12 more losses, stretching their losing streak to 26 consecutive games, still the longest in NFL history. Fans grew used to heartbreak week after week, and the Bucs became the league's punching bag. Finally, on December 11th, 1977, Tampa Bay broke through, defeating the New Orleans Saints 33-14. Players carried McKay off the field, and fans celebrated as if they had just won the Super Bowl. But the scars of those 2 seasons lingered, defining the team's early reputation. Arizona Cardinals, Super Bowl 43, lost to the Steelers. For Cardinals fans, the most painful moment in team history came on February 1st, 2009, in Super Bowl 43. After decades of being one of the league's least successful franchises, Arizona had finally broken through behind quarterback Kurt Warner and star wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald. With a high-powered offense and a Cinderella playoff run, the Cardinals reached their first Super Bowl, facing the Pittsburgh Steelers. For much of the game, Pittsburgh controlled the tempo, highlighted by linebacker James Harrison's 100-yard interception return just before halftime, still the longest play in Super Bowl history. But the Cardinals refused to quit. In the fourth quarter, Warner found Fitzgerald on a quick slant, and Fitzgerald raced 64 yards down the middle of the field for a touchdown, giving Arizona a 23-20 lead with just 2:37 left. The Cardinals were minutes away from pulling off a shocking victory and securing the franchise's first championship. But Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger engineered one of the greatest drives in Super Bowl history. With less than a minute remaining, he found Santonio Holmes in the corner of the end zone for a toe-tap touchdown, putting Pittsburgh ahead, 27-23. The Cardinals' final possession came up short, and the dream was over. Los Angeles Rams, Super Bowl 53, lost to the Patriots. For Rams fans, the most painful moment came on February 3rd, 2019 in Super Bowl 53. Sean McVay's young, innovative team had stormed to a 13-3 record behind quarterback Jared Goff, running back Todd Gurley, and the NFL's highest-scoring offense. The defense was anchored by Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh. Hopes were sky-high that this would be the Rams' coronation, with a chance to defeat Tom Brady and the New England Patriots on the biggest stage. Instead, the game turned into one of the ugliest and most frustrating Super Bowls ever played. The Patriots completely neutralized the Rams' offense, holding them scoreless until late in the fourth quarter. Goff looked overwhelmed, and Gurley, battling a mysterious knee issue, was a non-factor. For 3 quarters, the Rams couldn't generate anything, with drive after drive ending in punts. New England didn't fare much better, but in the 4th quarter, Brady finally broke through, connecting with Rob Gronkowski on a key pass that set up the game's only touchdown. The Rams' last chance ended with Goff throwing an interception, sealing a 13-3 Patriots victory. This was a team built on explosive offense and creativity, yet on the biggest stage, they managed just 3 points, the lowest total in Super Bowl history. What had been billed as a showcase of McVay's genius became instead a humbling reminder of how far the team still had to go. The sting was made worse by the context. The Rams had reached the Super Bowl thanks to a controversial NFC Championship win over the Saints, remembered for the infamous no call. Many outside fans believed the Rams didn't even deserve to be there, and their flat performance in the Super Bowl seemed to reinforce that narrative. San Francisco 49ers, Super Bowl 47 loss to the Ravens. For 49ers fans, the most painful modern moment came on February 3rd, 2013, in Super Bowl 47 against the Baltimore Ravens. After a decade of struggles, San Francisco had returned to glory under head coach Jim Harbaugh. With young quarterback Colin Kaepernick taking the league by storm and a defense led by stars like Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, the Niners were on the brink of a 6th Lombardi trophy. But in New Orleans, things spiraled quickly. The Ravens raced out to a 28-6 lead early in the 3rd quarter, with Joe Flacco throwing 3 first-half touchdown passes. Just when it seemed hopeless, the stadium lights infamously went out, delaying the game for over 30 minutes. The power outage seemed to flip the momentum, and the 49ers roared back. Kaepernick led a furious rally, throwing for 302 yards and rushing for 62 more, including a 15-yard touchdown run that cut the deficit to 31-29. With less than 2 minutes left, San Francisco drove deep into Ravens territory. On 4th and goal from the 5-yard line, Kaepernick lofted a fade toward Michael Crabtree. The pass fell incomplete after heavy contact from Baltimore's secondary, but no flag was thrown. The Ravens held on for a 34-31 victory. For 49ers fans, the heartbreak was twofold. Not only had they fallen just 5 yards short of tying or winning the game, but the controversy over the no call on Crabtree's target left many convinced they had been robbed of a fair shot. The power outage Super Bowl became a bitter memory, a game that slipped away despite an epic comeback. Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl 49, goal line interception. For Seahawks fans, no moment is more gut-wrenching than the ending of Super Bowl 49 on February 1st, 2015. Seattle was on the verge of winning back-to-back championships. They had dominated the NFC for 2 straight years, behind the Legion of Boom defense, Marshawn Lynch's power running, and Russell Wilson's playmaking. After dismantling Denver the year before in Super Bowl 48, they were seconds away from securing dynasty status. Facing the New England Patriots, the game was a classic back-and-forth battle. With less than a minute left, the Seahawks trailed 28-24, but had driven deep into Patriots territory. After an unbelievable juggling catch by Jermaine Kearse at the 5-yard line, Seattle had 1st and goal from the 1 with just 26 seconds remaining. Everyone expected the ball to go to Marshawn Lynch, one of the most feared short-yardage runners in NFL history. Instead, offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell called a quick slant pass. Wilson dropped back and fired toward Ricardo Lockett, but Patriots rookie cornerback Malcolm Butler jumped the route, intercepting the ball at the goal line and sealing the game for New England. The play shocked the football world. The Seahawks had victory in their grasp, only to lose in one of the most dramatic finishes in Super Bowl history. For Seattle fans, the pain was unbearable. The decision not to hand the ball to Lynch has been debated endlessly, and the interception became the defining moment of what could have been a dynasty. Seattle hasn't returned to the Super Bowl since, and that single play continues to haunt the fan base. Los Angeles Chargers, 2006, AFC Divisional Playoff Collapse versus Patriots. For Chargers fans, the 2006 playoffs are remembered as the ultimate what-if moment, a collapse that still stings nearly 2 decades later. That season, San Diego looked unstoppable. Led by MVP running back LaDainian Tomlinson, who set an NFL record with 31 touchdowns, the Chargers went 14-2, the best record in franchise history. With home field advantage throughout the playoffs, many believed this was finally the year the Chargers would break through and reach the Super Bowl. On January 14, 2007, the Chargers hosted Tom Brady and the New England Patriots in the divisional round. Early on, San Diego controlled the game, forcing turnovers and building a lead. Midway through the fourth quarter, the Chargers led 21-13 and appeared to have the game all but locked up when safety Marlon McCree intercepted Brady with just over 6 minutes left. But disaster struck. Instead of going down and securing possession, McCree attempted to return the interception and fumbled. The Patriots recovered, keeping their drive alive. Moments later, Brady threw a touchdown pass and a 2-point conversion to tie the game. The Chargers' offense sputtered, and New England kicked a late field goal to go ahead. A desperate final drive ended with a missed long field goal, sealing a 24-21 Patriots victory. For fans, the loss was gut-wrenching because it felt like a golden opportunity wasted. The Chargers had the league MVP, a stacked roster, and the top seed, but costly mistakes and undisciplined play cost them the game. Even worse, the defeat led to the firing of head coach Marty Schottenheimer, who had just delivered the best regular season in team history. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching. Every NFL team's coaching hire that set them back a decade. Hiring a head coach is the biggest gamble an NFL franchise can make. Get it right, and you could build a dynasty. Get it wrong, and the damage can last for years. We've seen coaching hires waste Super Bowl caliber rosters, derail promising quarterbacks, drive star players out of town, and send entire organizations into endless rebuilds. Sometimes the warning signs appeared almost immediately. Other times, the consequences weren't fully understood until years later. Today, we're looking at every NFL team's coaching hire that set them back a decade. This isn't simply a list of the worst coaches in league history. Instead, we're focusing on the decisions that changed the direction of a franchise for all the wrong reasons. We'll look at why each coach was hired, what went wrong once they took over, and how the fallout continued long after they were gone. Some of these hires failed because of bad luck, others failed because of bad football, and a few were disasters from the moment they were announced. Let's start with one of the most shocking coaching hires the NFL has ever seen. Indianapolis Colts, Jeff Saturday, 2022. When the Colts fired Frank Reich midway through the 2022 season, the expectation around the league was simple. Indianapolis would promote an experienced assistant coach to guide the team through the rest of the year before launching a full coaching search in the offseason. Instead, owner Jim Irsay stunned everyone. He handed the job to Jeff Saturday, a Colts legend, Super Bowl champion, and one of Peyton Manning's closest teammates. Saturday understood football as well as anyone, but there was one problem. He had never coached in the NFL. In fact, his only coaching experience came at the high school level, while he was working as an ESPN analyst. It was one of the most unconventional coaching hires in modern league history. To be fair, the Colts were already in trouble. Ever since Andrew Luck's retirement, they had cycled through veteran quarterbacks, hoping one of them could keep the franchise in contention. Philip Rivers retired after one season. Carson Wentz lasted just a year. Then, Matt Ryan struggled behind an offensive line that unexpectedly collapsed. At 3-5-1, Jim Irsay believed the team needed a spark, and he trusted one of the most respected players in franchise history to provide it. For 1 week, it looked like he had made the right decision. Saturday won his debut against the Raiders, and suddenly the criticism quieted down. Then, reality caught up. The Colts lost 7 of their final 8 games. The offense never found consistency, and Indianapolis suffered one of the most embarrassing defeats in NFL history after blowing a 33-point lead to the Vikings, the largest comeback the league has ever seen. Saturday finished with a 1-7 record, and the Colts immediately began another coaching search. While he wasn't solely responsible for the franchise's struggles, the hire symbolized an organization making emotional decisions instead of long-term football decisions. It delayed stability once again, forcing Indianapolis into yet another reset after years of searching for life after Andrew Luck. Seattle Seahawks, Jim Mora Jr., 2009. Replacing a successful head coach is one of the toughest jobs in football. And that's exactly what the Seahawks asked Jim Mora Jr. to do in 2009. Mike Holmgren had spent a decade transforming Seattle into a consistent contender, leading the franchise to 6 division titles, 5 straight playoff appearances between 2003 and 2007, and its first Super Bowl appearance. Knowing Holmgren planned to step away, owner Paul Allen and general manager Tim Ruskell hired Mora a year in advance as coach-in-waiting, hoping for a seamless transition. Instead, the transition couldn't have gone much worse. The Seahawks entered 2009 believing they still had enough veteran talent to compete. Matt Hasselbeck returned at quarterback after an injury-plagued 2008 season, while players like Walter Jones, Lofa Tatupu, and Julian Peterson gave the roster proven leadership. But Seattle stumbled out of the gate, losing 5 of its first 7 games. Injuries mounted, the offense lacked consistency, and Mora struggled to establish his own identity after spending a year preparing to replace a franchise icon. The Seahawks finished just 5-11, their worst record since 1996. They ranked near the bottom of the league offensively, failed to win a single road game, and looked nothing like the disciplined teams Holmgren had built. Even more concerning was the growing disconnect between the coaching staff and the front office, with Mora publicly criticizing personnel decisions late in the season. After only 1 year, Seattle fired Mora, making his coach-in-waiting experiment one of the shortest head coaching tenures in franchise history. Fortunately for the Seahawks, they recovered quickly by hiring Pete Carroll in 2010, who built a championship team around the Legion of Boom. But Mora's failed transition cost Seattle an entire season and proved that replacing a legendary coach is rarely as simple as promoting the next man in line. Houston Texans, David Culley, 2021. By the time the Texans hired David Culley, the franchise was already in freefall. Bill O'Brien's disastrous tenure as both head coach and general manager had left Houston with a depleted roster, a lack of premium draft picks, and growing tension with franchise quarterback Deshaun Watson. What had been one of the AFC's most consistent playoff teams suddenly looked directionless. Culley wasn't the flashy name many expected. At 65 years old, he had spent decades as a respected assistant coach, but had never been a coordinator in the NFL. The Texans sold him as a leader who could stabilize a chaotic organization while helping usher in a new culture. Instead, the problems proved far bigger than any coach could fix. Watson never played a snap during Culley's lone season due to legal issues and his trade request. Rookie quarterback Davis Mills showed flashes, but the roster lacked talent on both sides of the ball, and Houston finished 4-13. While the record wasn't surprising, the franchise still fired Culley after just 1 season. The decision exposed an even bigger problem. Rather than committing to a long-term plan, the Texans had hired a coach who many believed was never intended to be the franchise's future. It delayed their rebuild, created even more instability, and forced the organization to start over once again just 1 year later. Baltimore Ravens, Ted Marchibroda, 1996. Unlike most teams on this list, the Ravens weren't crippled by one disastrous coaching hire. But when the franchise arrived in Baltimore after relocating from Cleveland in 1996, it needed a leader who could establish an identity from day one. Owner Art Modell turned to Ted Marchibroda, a respected veteran coach who had previously led the Colts. His experience made sense for a brand new franchise trying to find its footing. The problem was that experience alone wasn't enough. The Ravens struggled to compete during Marchibroda's 3 seasons, posting just 1 winning record, while the offense consistently ranked among the league's weakest. Although the defense was beginning to assemble future stars like Ray Lewis, The team never took the next step under his leadership. Baltimore eventually moved on after the 1998 season and hired Brian Billick. Just 2 years later, Billick led the Ravens to their first Super Bowl championship behind one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. Marchibroda wasn't a terrible coach, but he wasn't the visionary Baltimore needed. His tenure delayed the franchise's rise, making this more of a missed opportunity than an outright disaster. Kansas City Chiefs, Romeo Crennel, 2012. When the Chiefs promoted Romeo Crennel to full-time head coach in 2012, the move felt understandable. He had taken over on an interim basis after Todd Haley was fired late in the 2011 season and immediately won 2 of his final 3 games, including a stunning 19-14 upset over the previously unbeaten Green Bay Packers. Players respected him, the locker room rallied around him, and many believed he had earned the opportunity. Unfortunately, the momentum disappeared almost immediately. Kansas City opened the 2012 season with 6 straight losses and never recovered. The offense became one of the league's least productive units, cycling between Matt Castle and Brady Quinn at quarterback while failing to establish any rhythm. The Chiefs finished the season with a 2-14 record, tied for the worst in the NFL, averaging just 13.2 points per game while committing a league-high 37 turnovers. It was a dramatic collapse for a roster that featured stars like Jamal Charles, Dwayne Bowe, Tamba Hali, Justin Houston, and Eric Berry. The season was overshadowed by tragedy when linebacker Jovan Belcher killed his girlfriend before taking his own life at the team's practice facility, an event that deeply affected everyone within the organization. While no coach could have prepared for such circumstances, the football product had already been unraveling well before that heartbreaking day. Crennel was dismissed after just 1 full season, and the Chiefs immediately turned to Andy Reid in 2013. Reid inherited many of the same core players and orchestrated one of the quickest turnarounds in NFL history, leading Kansas City to an 11-5 record in his first season after the team had gone 2-14 the year before. That dramatic improvement highlighted just how costly the Crennel hire had been. What looked like a feel-good promotion ultimately delayed the arrival of the sustained success Chiefs fans enjoy today. Green Bay Packers, Ray Rhodes, 1999. Few franchises have enjoyed as much stability as the Green Bay Packers, which makes Ray Rhodes one of the easier choices for this list. After Mike Holmgren left for Seattle following the 1998 season, the Packers needed someone who could keep their championship window open with Brett Favre still playing at an elite level. Rhodes had found success with the Philadelphia Eagles and was viewed as an experienced coach capable of maintaining Green Bay's winning culture. Instead, everything unraveled almost immediately. The Packers finished 8-8 in Rhodes' only season, missing the playoffs despite having a Hall of Fame quarterback under center. The defense regressed, the team lacked discipline, and the energy that had defined the Holmgren era quickly disappeared. For a roster that expected to contend for another Super Bowl, mediocrity wasn't acceptable. Green Bay fired Rhodes after just 1 season, replacing him with Mike Sherman. While the Packers recovered relatively quickly, the hire still cost them valuable time during Brett Favre's prime. It serves as a reminder that even the league's best-run organizations can make the wrong decision when trying to replace a legendary coach. Minnesota Vikings, Leigh Steckel, 1984. When Bud Grant retired after the 1983 season, the Vikings faced the nearly impossible task of replacing the most successful coach in franchise history. Grant had spent 18 seasons building Minnesota into one of the NFL's model organizations, leading the team to 4 Super Bowl appearances and 11 division titles. Rather than hiring an experienced head coach, the Vikings promoted 38-year-old Les Steckel, their wide receivers coach, believing his energy and military-style discipline would usher in a new era. It didn't take long for that plan to backfire. Steckel immediately tried to change the culture that players had embraced under Grant. Practices became longer and more physically demanding. Meetings were stricter, and the relaxed atmosphere that had defined the Vikings for years disappeared almost overnight. Many veteran players felt they were being treated like college athletes rather than seasoned professionals, and reports of frustration inside the locker room surfaced early in the season. The problems quickly showed on the field. Minnesota lost 6 of its first 8 games and never found any consistency. Quarterback Tommy Kramer battled injuries. The offense struggled to sustain drives, and a defense that had once been the team's identity couldn't keep games under control. The Vikings finished 3-13, the worst record in franchise history at the time, while allowing an NFL-high 484 points, an average of more than 30 points per game. It was a staggering collapse for a franchise that had gone 8-8 just 1 year earlier. Owner Max Winter acted swiftly, firing Steckel after only 1 season and convincing Bud Grant to come out of retirement for 1985. Grant immediately restored stability, leading the Vikings back to a respectable 7-9 record despite an aging roster. Les Steckel's tenure lasted just 16 games, but it became one of the clearest examples of how drastically the wrong leadership style can fracture an established locker room. Instead of building on Bud Grant's legacy, the Vikings spent years trying to regain the consistency they had once taken for granted. Los Angeles Chargers, Mike Riley, 1999. The Chargers entered the 1999 season hoping Mike Riley could breathe new life into a franchise that had steadily declined since its Super Bowl appearance just 5 years earlier. Riley had built a strong reputation in the Canadian Football League and was viewed as an innovative offensive mind who could modernize San Diego's attack. Instead, the rebuilding project never gained traction. The Chargers opened the season by losing 7 of their first 8 games, and although they showed occasional flashes on offense, they consistently struggled to close out contests. Jim Harbaugh battled injuries before Ryan Leaf took over at quarterback, the 2nd overall pick in the 1998 NFL Draft. Rather than developing into the franchise quarterback San Diego desperately needed, Leaf's confidence continued to erode amid poor performances, mounting interceptions, and growing criticism from both the media and fans. The Chargers finished 8-8 in Riley's first season, offering a glimpse of hope, but any optimism quickly disappeared in 2000. San Diego stumbled to a league-worst 1-15 record, averaging just 15.1 points per game, while allowing 30 or more points in 9 different contests. The lone victory came against the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 15, preventing a winless season. Ryan Leaf's relationship with the organization completely unraveled, and what was supposed to be the franchise's future instead became one of the biggest draft busts in NFL history. Riley was dismissed after the disastrous 2000 campaign, finishing his NFL tenure with a 14-34 record. The Chargers eventually recovered by drafting LaDainian Tomlinson and Drew Brees in 2001, but Riley's hiring coincided with one of the darkest stretches in franchise history. Rather than accelerating the rebuild, the franchise lost 2 valuable years and was forced to start almost from scratch once again. Arizona Cardinals, Steve Wilks, 2018. The Cardinals knew they were entering a new era after the 2017 season. Bruce Arians had retired following 5 successful years that included 2 playoff appearances and a trip to the NFC Championship game, while franchise quarterback Carson Palmer also called it a career. For the first time in years, Arizona needed both a new head coach and a long-term answer under center. The organization turned to Steve Wilks, a respected defensive coordinator from Carolina who had helped build one of the league's most physical defenses. Wilks preached toughness, accountability, and a defensive-first philosophy, believing Arizona could remain competitive while developing rookie quarterback Josh Rosen, whom the Cardinals selected 10th overall in the 2018 NFL Draft. Almost nothing went according to plan. Arizona opened the season by scoring just 6 points in a loss to Washington and never recovered offensively. New offensive coordinator Mike McCoy's scheme failed to maximize Rosen's strengths, and after 6 games averaging just 13.5 points per contest, McCoy was fired. The change came too late. Behind one of the league's worst offensive lines, Rosen absorbed constant pressure, throwing 11 touchdowns against 14 interceptions, while posting a passer rating of just 66.7. Meanwhile, David Johnson, who had been one of football's most dynamic running backs only 2 years earlier, was never fully utilized. The Cardinals finished 3-13, the worst record in the NFL, averaging a league-low 14.1 points per game and ranking dead last in total offense. Wilks was fired after only 1 season, becoming the first Cardinals head coach since 1978 to last just a single year. The fallout extended well beyond his record. Arizona abandoned the Josh Rosen experiment after only 1 season, trading him away in 2019 before selecting Kyler Murray with the first overall pick. While Murray eventually became the franchise quarterback, Wilks' brief tenure delayed the rebuild and forced the Cardinals to reset both their coaching staff and quarterback position almost immediately after beginning a new era. Tennessee Titans, Ken Whisenhunt, 2014. Following 3 consecutive losing seasons under Mike Munchak, the Titans believed they needed an experienced offensive coach to modernize the franchise. Ken Whisenhunt looked like the perfect candidate. He had guided the Arizona Cardinals to Super Bowl 43, developed quarterbacks like Kurt Warner and Phillip Rivers, and was considered one of the NFL's brightest offensive minds. Expectations were high when he arrived in Nashville. Whisenhunt's tenure actually began with a promising 26-10 victory over the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 1 of the 2014 season. But that success quickly faded as Tennessee lost 11 of its next 12 games, finishing 2-14. Veteran quarterback Charlie Whitehurst struggled. Rookie Zach Mettenberger showed flashes but couldn't stay healthy, and the Titans ranked near the bottom of the league in both scoring offense and total yards. Hoping for a fresh start, Tennessee drafted Marcus Mariota with the 2nd overall pick in 2015. Mariota's NFL debut was spectacular, throwing 4 touchdown passes and a perfect passer rating against Tampa Bay. It appeared Whisenhunt had finally found the quarterback to build around. The optimism didn't last. The Titans lost 6 of their next 7 games. The offense stalled once again, and Whisenhunt was fired after a 1-6 start in his 2nd season. His overall record in Tennessee was just 3-20, one of the worst winning percentages in franchise history. Although Mariota eventually led Tennessee to the playoffs under Mike Mularkey, Whisenhunt's inability to establish an offensive identity wasted valuable development time for the young quarterback and delayed the Titans' rebuild. What looked like the hiring of an experienced offensive expert instead became another costly reset for a franchise searching for stability. Los Angeles Rams, Steve Spagnuolo, 2009. By 2009, the Rams had already fallen a long way from the greatest show on turf. Just a decade earlier, they were Super Bowl champions with Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, and Torrey Holt leading one of the greatest offenses in NFL history. But after years of poor drafting, injuries, and front office instability, St. Louis entered the 2009 season desperate for a complete reset. The organization believed Steve Spagnuolo was the man to deliver it. Fresh off coordinating the New York Giants' Super Bowl 42 winning defense, including the unit that famously slowed down the previously undefeated Patriots, Spagnuolo was regarded as one of the brightest defensive minds in football. The Rams hoped his leadership could restore credibility to a franchise coming off a miserable 2-14 campaign. Instead, the rebuilding process stalled almost immediately. The Rams lost their first 8 games and struggled in nearly every phase of football. Veteran quarterback Mark Bulger battled injuries and inconsistency before eventually losing his starting job, while the offense finished last in the NFL with just 10.9 points per game. St. Louis ended the year 1-15, with its only victory coming against the Detroit Lions in Week 8. It marked the franchise's worst season since moving to St. Louis and secured the first overall pick in the 2010 NFL Draft. Things improved only slightly in 2010 after the Rams drafted quarterback Sam Bradford first overall. They finished 7-9 and surprisingly entered Week 17 with a chance to win the NFC West, but a home loss to Seattle ended those hopes. Any momentum disappeared the following season as injuries piled up, Bradford regressed, and the Rams stumbled to a 2-14 start before Spagnuolo was fired with a 10-38 overall record. While the Rams eventually rebuilt under Sean McVay years later, Spagnuolo's tenure highlighted just how deep the organization's problems had become. The franchise spent years searching for answers before finally returning to contention. Atlanta Falcons, Bobby Petrino, 2007. Few coaching hires in NFL history unraveled as spectacularly as Bobby Petrino's. The Falcons hired Petrino in 2007 after he built Louisville into one of college football's most explosive programs. He was considered an offensive genius, and Atlanta hoped he could maximize quarterback Michael Vick's rare athletic ability while leading the franchise into a new era. Before Petrino even coached his first regular season game, everything changed. During the preseason, Michael Vick was suspended indefinitely after his involvement in a dogfighting operation became public. Suddenly, the Falcons lost the player their entire offense had been built around. Veteran Joey Harrington took over at quarterback, but Atlanta stumbled to a 3-10 record through its first 13 games. The offense ranked near the bottom of the league. The defense struggled to keep opponents in check, and frustration inside the locker room continued to grow. Then came the moment that defined Petrino's legacy. With 3 games remaining in the season, he resigned without telling most of his players face-to-face, leaving behind only a short letter in their lockers before accepting the head coaching job at Arkansas. Veterans were furious. Several players later admitted they learned about his departure from television reports rather than from Petrino himself. Hall of Fame tight end Algie Crumpler famously called him a coward, a sentiment shared by many throughout the organization. Atlanta finished 4-12 under a combination of Petrino and interim coach Emmett Thomas, but the damage extended beyond the record. The franchise had lost its franchise quarterback, its head coach, and any sense of direction in less than a year. Fortunately for the Falcons, they recovered quickly by hiring Mike Smith in 2008 and drafting Matt Ryan with the 3rd overall pick. Together, they transformed Atlanta into a perennial playoff contender. But Petrino's abrupt departure remains one of the most embarrassing coaching failures in NFL history and a textbook example of how quickly a franchise can descend into chaos. Miami Dolphins, Cam Cameron, 2007. The Miami Dolphins entered the 2007 season believing they had found the coach who could restore the franchise to its former glory. After a disappointing 6-10 season under Nick Saban's replacement, Nick Saban's departure had left Miami searching for stability. The Dolphins turned to Cam Cameron, an offensive coordinator with experience developing quarterbacks and a reputation as a creative offensive mind. On paper, the hire made sense. Cameron had worked with Drew Brees in San Diego and was viewed as someone who could bring fresh ideas to Miami's offense. The Dolphins also believed they had enough veteran talent to compete, with players like Jason Taylor, Zach Thomas, and Ronnie Brown still anchoring the roster. Instead, everything collapsed almost immediately. Miami opened the 2007 season with a 0-13 record, becoming one of the worst teams in NFL history. The offense struggled to generate explosive plays, injuries destroyed the roster, and the team failed to establish any consistency on either side of the ball. Quarterback Trent Green suffered a season-ending concussion in Week 5, leaving Cleo Lemon to lead an offense that ranked 27th in scoring. The Dolphins finally earned their first victory in Week 15, defeating the Baltimore Ravens 22-16 in overtime. The win prevented Miami from becoming the first team in NFL history to finish 0-16, but it could not save Cameron's job. He was fired after just one season with a 1-15 record, the worst finish in franchise history. The damage from that season went beyond the standings. Miami was forced into a complete organizational reset, firing general manager Randy Mueller and beginning another rebuild. The franchise eventually found stability under Tony Sparano in 2008, but Cameron's failed tenure became a symbol of how quickly a once proud organization could fall apart. The Dolphins' biggest problem wasn't just losing games, it was that the team had no clear direction, and the Cameron era became another lost chapter in their long search for relevance. New Orleans Saints, Mike Ditka, 1997. Before Sean Payton and Drew Brees turned New Orleans into a championship contender, the Saints spent decades searching for a coach who could finally change their fortunes. In 1997, they believed they had found that person in Mike Ditka. Ditka wasn't an ordinary hire. He was a Hall of Fame tight end, a Super Bowl winning coach with the Chicago Bears, and one of the biggest personalities in football history. When New Orleans hired him, expectations immediately skyrocketed. The Saints believed his toughness and championship experience could transform a franchise that had reached the playoffs only 4 times in their first 30 seasons. Instead, the Ditka era quickly became a disaster. The Saints went 6-10 in his first season, finishing near the bottom of the league in offense while struggling to find consistency at quarterback. Rather than patiently building a roster, Ditka became obsessed with finding a franchise quarterback and made one of the most famous draft day decisions in NFL history. In the 1999 NFL Draft, New Orleans traded away its entire draft class, plus future first-round picks, to move up and select Texas running back Ricky Williams, 5th overall. Ditka famously wore a wedding-themed outfit during the draft, celebrating the arrival of the player he believed would transform the franchise. Instead, the trade became a symbol of poor decision-making. Williams had talent, but the Saints sacrificed valuable draft capital and failed to build the roster around him. The team finished 3-13 in 1999, with one of the league's weakest offenses, and Ditka was fired after the season, with an overall record of 15-33 during his 3 years in New Orleans. The Saints spent years recovering from the damage. The Ricky Williams trade cost them opportunities to add young talent, while Ditka's inability to create a sustainable system left the franchise searching for another rebuild. Eventually, New Orleans found its answer with Sean Payton and Drew Brees in 2006. But the Ditka era remains one of the clearest examples of how a famous name and championship reputation don't always translate into success in a new environment. Philadelphia Eagles, Rich Kotite, 1991. The Philadelphia Eagles entered the 1990s believing they were finally close to becoming a championship contender. Under head coach Buddy Ryan, Philadelphia had built one of the NFL's most feared defenses, led by stars like Reggie White, Jerome Brown, Seth Joyner, and Clyde Simmons. The team had made the playoffs 4 straight seasons, but after losing in the wild card round following the 1990 season, owner Norman Brayman decided a change was needed. Instead of finding an outside replacement, the Eagles promoted offensive coordinator Rich Kotite. At first, the decision looked reasonable. Kotite had helped coordinate an offense that supported one of the league's best teams, and the Eagles hoped he could provide balance to a team that had been criticized for being too defense-focused under Ryan. The problem was that Kotite inherited a team built around a very specific culture, and he struggled to maintain it. Philadelphia had a 10-6 record that season and appeared to remain among the NFC's elite. However, the offense remained inconsistent, and the team failed to advance beyond the wild card round. The following season, injuries began to pile up, including the devastating death of defensive tackle Jerome Brown in a car accident just before the 1992 season. The emotional impact affected the entire organization. By 1993, the decline was impossible to ignore. The Eagles finished 8-8, their worst record since 1976, and the team struggled with inconsistent quarterback play and declining defensive dominance. Kotite's conservative approach frustrated players and fans, and questions grew about whether he was the right person to lead a talented roster. The breaking point came in 1994. Philadelphia started 7-2, but collapsed down the stretch, losing 7 of its final 8 games and missing the playoffs. Kotite was fired after finishing his Eagles tenure with a 36-44 record. His biggest failure wasn't simply losing games. It was failing to maximize a roster that was already close to contention. After Kotite's departure, the Eagles spent years rebuilding before finally finding stability under Andy Reid in 1999.
Kotite didn't destroy Philadelphia, but he represented a missed opportunity. The Eagles had a championship-level defense and a talented core, but the wrong coaching transition kept them from reaching their potential.
Pittsburgh Steelers, Joe Walton, 1985.
The Pittsburgh Steelers are one of the NFL's most stable organizations, which makes their coaching failures rare. But before Chuck Noll's successor was Bill Cowher, Pittsburgh went through one of the most difficult transitions in franchise history. After winning 4 Super Bowls during the 1970s, the Steelers entered the 1980s facing the natural decline that comes after a dynasty. Chuck Noll remained respected, but the roster that had dominated the league was aging, and Pittsburgh needed a new offensive direction. In 1985, the Steelers hired Joe Walton as offensive coordinator before promoting him into a larger leadership role within the organization. Walton was known as an innovative offensive mind, but he never became the long-term answer Pittsburgh needed. The Steelers struggled throughout the late 1980s as they attempted to rebuild after losing many of their championship-era stars. In 1985, Pittsburgh finished 7-9, missing the playoffs for the first time in several years. The following season, they improved slightly to 6-10, and although the team showed flashes with young players like linebacker David Little and quarterback Bubby Brister, consistency remained impossible. The biggest issue was that Pittsburgh had entered a difficult rebuilding period, and Walton's approach failed to provide the leadership needed to guide the franchise through it. The Steelers finished 8-7-1 in 1987 and 5-11 in 1988, leading to Walton's departure after just 4 seasons. His final record with Pittsburgh was 22-34-1, making him one of the few coaches in franchise history to experience extended losing seasons. However, the Steelers' organizational structure prevented the damage from lasting too long. Pittsburgh hired Bill Cowher in 1992, rebuilt through the draft, and returned to championship contention. Joe Walton's tenure did not ruin the Steelers, but it delayed their return to greatness. His hiring showed that even the NFL's best-run franchises can struggle when they fail to find the right person to lead during a transition period.
Buffalo Bills, Rex Ryan, 2015.
When the Buffalo Bills hired Rex Ryan in 2015, it felt like one of the biggest coaching moves of the offseason. Ryan was one of the NFL's most recognizable personalities, a defensive mastermind who had turned the New York Jets into a legitimate contender. During his time in New York, Ryan led the Jets to back-to-back AFC Championship game appearances in 2009 and 2010, and Buffalo believed his aggressive style could finally end the franchise's playoff drought. The timing seemed perfect. The Bills had a talented roster filled with young stars. Defensive tackle Marcell Dareus was coming off a dominant season. Mario Williams was still one of the league's premier pass rushers. LaShawn McCoy had just arrived in a trade with Philadelphia, and the defense ranked among the league's best under previous head coach Doug Marrone. Ryan's message was simple. The Bills were not rebuilding. They were ready to compete. Unfortunately, the results never matched the confidence. Buffalo started the 2015 season 2-2, including a dramatic victory over the Tennessee Titans, where the defense forced 5 turnovers. But inconsistency quickly became the story of the season. Ryan's defense, which had been his greatest strength, collapsed. The Bills allowed 26.4 points per game, ranked near the bottom of the league in yards allowed, and struggled to generate the pressure that had defined Ryan's previous teams. The biggest issue was the culture change. Ryan brought his trademark confidence and personality, but some players questioned whether the team had become more focused on attention than execution.
The Bills finished 8-8, missing the playoffs for the 16th consecutive season. Instead of improving in year 2, things became worse. Ryan introduced his brother Rob as defensive coordinator in 2016, creating one of the league's most talked about coaching arrangements. However, the defense continued to struggle, and Buffalo fell apart late in the season. After a 15-14 loss to the New York Giants in Week 16, the Bills fired Ryan with 1 game remaining, ending his tenure with a 15-16 record. The aftermath was costly. Buffalo entered another coaching search, changed defensive philosophies again, and continued searching for stability. While Sean McDermott eventually built the team into a contender, the Rex Ryan era delayed Buffalo's progress during a period when the roster was ready to compete. Ryan arrived promising to bring swagger back to Buffalo. Instead, he left behind another reset. New York Giants, Ben McAdoo, 2016. The New York Giants believed they had found their next long-term coach when they promoted offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo in 2016. After helping guide the offense during Tom Coughlin's final seasons, McAdoo represented a younger, more modern approach for a franchise looking to move beyond its championship-winning era. The hire initially looked successful. In McAdoo's first season, the Giants returned to the playoffs for the first time since winning Super Bowl 46 in 2011. Behind a dominant defense featuring players like Jason Pierre-Paul, Olivier Vernon, Janoris Jenkins, and Landon Collins, New York finished 11-5 and earned a wild card spot. But the cracks were already beginning to appear. The offense never reached the level expected from a team built around Eli Manning and star receiver Odell Beckham Jr. New York finished 26th in scoring offense during the 2016 season, and tension grew between the coaching staff and several key players. Despite making the playoffs, the Giants lost 38-13 to the Green Bay Packers in the wild card round, exposing major problems on offense. The following season, everything collapsed. The Giants opened 2017 with 5 straight losses and finished the year 3-13, their worst record since 2003. The offense became one of the league's least productive units. Injuries devastated the roster, and the relationship between McAdoo and the locker room completely deteriorated. The breaking point came when McAdoo benched Eli Manning in favor of Geno Smith in Week 13, ending Manning's streak of 210 consecutive starts. The decision shocked the organization and angered many fans, who viewed Manning as the face of the franchise's greatest era. 2 days later, the Giants fired McAdoo and general manager Jerry Reese. McAdoo finished his Giants tenure with a 13-15 record, and his brief time in charge triggered a complete organizational reset. The Giants moved on from veteran players, searched for a new quarterback, changed coaches multiple times, and spent years trying to rebuild a team that had briefly appeared ready to return to contention. The McAdoo hire didn't destroy the Giants by itself, but it represented the beginning of one of the franchise's longest stretches of instability in modern history. Cincinnati Bengals, Dave Shula, 1992. The Cincinnati Bengals were searching for a fresh start when they hired Dave Shula in 1992. After the successful era of Sam Wyche, which included a Super Bowl appearance following the 1988 season, the franchise had fallen into decline. The Bengals believed a young coach with a fresh perspective could help rebuild the organization and bring back the aggressive style that had made them competitive. Instead, they hired the youngest head coach in NFL history. Shula was just 32 years old when Cincinnati gave him the job. His last name carried enormous weight because he was the son of legendary Miami Dolphins coach Don Shula. But the pressure that came with that reputation was immediate. Many wondered whether he was ready to lead an NFL locker room, especially one already dealing with an aging roster and declining talent. The warning signs appeared almost immediately. Cincinnati finished Shula's first season with a 5-11 record in 1992, But the real collapse came in 1993. The Bengals lost their first 10 games, struggled to generate offense, and finished 3-13. Quarterback David Klingler, selected 6th overall in the 1992 NFL Draft, failed to develop behind a struggling offensive line, while the defense lacked the talent needed to keep games competitive. The following season became one of the darkest periods in franchise history. The Bengals started 1994 with 7 straight losses, extending their losing streak to 17 consecutive games. Fans began losing faith, and the organization appeared completely directionless. Shula was fired after an 0-8 start, finishing his Bengals tenure with a record of 8-24. The damage from the hire was significant. Cincinnati spent the rest of the 1990s searching for stability, cycling through coaches and struggling to build a competitive roster. The franchise didn't return to the playoffs until 2005, more than a decade after Shula's arrival. Dave Shula's failure wasn't just about his win-loss record. The Bengals handed control of a struggling franchise to someone who wasn't prepared for the challenge, and the result was one of the longest rebuilding periods in team history. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Greg Schiano, 2012. When Greg Schiano arrived in Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers believed they had found the coach who could finally bring discipline and toughness to a talented but inconsistent roster. Schiano had rebuilt Rutgers into a respectable college program, earning a reputation as a demanding leader who emphasized accountability and physical football. The Buccaneers hoped that mentality would translate to the NFL. At first, it looked promising. Tampa Bay opened the 2012 season with a 2-1 record, and the defense immediately showed improvement. The Buccaneers were aggressive, physical, and ranked among the league leaders in stopping the run. However, the team struggled to maintain that momentum, and Schiano's hardline coaching style quickly began creating tension. One of the biggest controversies came during the infamous victory formation incident against the New York Giants. With the Giants kneeling to end the game, Schiano instructed his defenders to aggressively rush the offensive line in an attempt to force a fumble. The move angered opponents and drew criticism across the league, with many viewing it as unnecessary and against football etiquette. The issues continued into 2013. Quarterback Josh Freeman, who had thrown for over 4,000 yards in 2012, lost confidence in the system and eventually lost his starting job. Tampa Bay began the season 0-8, leading to Freeman's release and complete offensive instability. The Buccaneers finished 4-12, and Schiano's relationship with players continued to deteriorate. After only 2 seasons, Tampa Bay fired him with an 11-21 record. The problem wasn't simply the losses. The Buccaneers had talent, including running back Doug Martin, receiver Vincent Jackson, defensive tackle Gerald McCoy, and cornerback Darrelle Revis. But Schiano failed to create a sustainable environment, and the organization was forced into another coaching search. Tampa Bay eventually found success years later under Bruce Arians and Tom Brady, winning Super Bowl 55. But the Schiano era represented another wasted opportunity for a team that had pieces capable of competing. His tenure proved that bringing college-style discipline into the NFL requires more than intensity. It requires trust, communication, and the ability to lead professional athletes. Carolina Panthers, Matt Rule, 2020. The Carolina Panthers entered 2020 searching for a new identity. After 9 seasons under Ron Rivera, including a Super Bowl appearance and 5 playoff trips, the franchise decided it was time for a complete reset. Owner David Tepper wanted a modern coach who could build the organization from the ground up. He found that coach in Matt Rule. Rule had earned respect in college football after rebuilding struggling programs at Temple and Baylor. His ability to turn around teams quickly convinced Carolina that he could do the same in the NFL. The Panthers gave him a massive 7-year contract, believing they had found their long-term answer. The reality was much different. From the beginning, Rule treated the Panthers like a college rebuilding project. He emphasized culture changes,
constantly reshaped the roster and relied heavily on players he was familiar with from his college days. But the NFL moves much faster, and Carolina struggled to establish any consistency. Rule's first season ended with a 5-11 record. The Panthers moved on from longtime quarterback Cam Newton, signed Teddy Bridgewater, and attempted to build around a new offensive approach. Bridgewater played efficiently, but the team lacked explosiveness and finished near the bottom of the league in scoring. The biggest mistake came at quarterback. In 2021, Carolina traded 3 draft picks, including a second-round selection, to acquire Sam Darnold from the New York Jets. The Panthers believed a change of scenery could unlock the former 3rd overall pick. Instead, Darnold struggled, threw 9 interceptions in 12 games, and the offense remained stagnant. Carolina started the 2022 season 1-4, and after a 37-15 loss to the San Francisco 49ers, the Panthers finally moved on. Rule finished his NFL career with an 11-27 record, including a 1-11 record against NFC opponents during his final stretch. The damage was significant. Carolina wasted 3 seasons searching for direction, cycled through quarterbacks, and entered another rebuild after giving Rule full control over the roster. Matt Rule wasn't simply a failed coach. He represented a franchise believing that an NFL rebuild could be handled like a college program. That mistake cost Carolina years. Chicago Bears, Mark Trestman, 2013. The Chicago Bears believed Mark Trestman was the offensive mind they had been searching for. After years of defensive-minded football under Lovie Smith, Chicago wanted a coach who could modernize the offense and maximize the talent surrounding quarterback Jay Cutler. Trestman arrived in 2013 with an impressive resume. He had worked with quarterbacks like Steve Young, Rich Gannon, and Jay Fiedler, and his offensive system helped lead the Montreal Alouettes to multiple championships in the Canadian Football League. For one season, everything seemed to be working. The Bears finished 8-8 in 2013, but the offense exploded under Trestman. Jay Cutler threw for over 2,600 yards. Despite missing time with injuries, Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey became one of the league's best receiver duos, and Matt Forte remained one of football's most versatile running backs. Chicago finished 2nd in the NFL in total offense. The problem was the defense completely collapsed. After losing longtime defensive coordinator Rod Marinelli, the Bears struggled badly on that side of the ball, allowing 478 points, the second most in franchise history. A promising offensive season was wasted because Chicago couldn't stop anyone. Then came the collapse. The 2014 season exposed everything wrong with the organization. The Bears finished 5-11. The locker room became divided, and reports emerged that players questioned Trestman's leadership style. Unlike many NFL coaches who commanded the room with personality, Trestman was viewed by some players as distant and disconnected. The breaking point came after a 50-14 loss to the Green Bay Packers on Thanksgiving night. Chicago fired Trestman the following season after the Bears started 0-3 in 2015. His final record was 13-19. The Bears spent years recovering from the decision. Jay Cutler's career stalled, the offensive potential of the roster was wasted, and Chicago went through multiple coaching changes before eventually finding stability under Matt Nagy and later Matt Eberflus. Trestman wasn't a disaster because his offense failed. It was because he fixed one side of the franchise while allowing everything else to fall apart. Washington Commanders, Jim Zorn, 2008. The Washington franchise has had its share of coaching disasters, but Jim Zorn's hiring stands out because of how unprepared the organization appeared from the beginning. After Joe Gibbs retired following the 2007 season, Washington needed a coach who could continue the stability Gibbs had restored. Instead, owner Daniel Snyder and executive Vinny Serrato hired Zorn, a longtime quarterbacks coach who had never been an NFL head coach. The plan was unusual.
Washington originally hired Zorn as offensive coordinator before suddenly promoting him to head coach. The team hoped his West Coast offensive background could bring creativity and improve quarterback Jason Campbell's development.
The first half of 2008 created unexpected optimism. Washington started the season 6-2, including impressive wins over the Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles. Campbell looked improved, Clinton Portis was having a strong year, and fans briefly believed the franchise had finally found direction. Then everything fell apart. The Redskins lost 7 of their final 8 games, finishing 8-8 and missing the playoffs. The offense became predictable, injuries hurt the roster, and questions grew about whether Zorn had control of the team. Reports surfaced that management was interfering with coaching decisions, creating a chaotic environment behind the scenes. The dysfunction continued into 2009. Washington started 2-4, and the organization attempted to strip Zorn of play-calling responsibilities by bringing in Sherman Lewis as a consultant. The move publicly weakened Zorn's authority and made it clear he no longer had full control. The Redskins finished 4-12, and Zorn was fired after only 2 seasons with a 12-20 record. His failure was not entirely his own. Washington's front office created an impossible situation by hiring an inexperienced coach while constantly interfering with football decisions. But the result was another wasted period for a franchise that had already struggled to find stability. The Zorn era became another example of Washington's biggest problem during that period. The organization was not just searching for the right coach, it was searching for the right way to operate. Denver Broncos, Josh McDaniels, 2009. The Denver Broncos believed they had found the next great offensive mind when they hired Josh McDaniels in 2009. At just 32 years old, McDaniels arrived after serving as the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots during their record-breaking 2007 season. He had worked closely with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and Denver believed he could bring the same championship formula to the franchise. The expectations were enormous. McDaniels inherited a team that had finished 8-8 in 2008, but had enough talent to compete. The Broncos had quarterback Jay Cutler, receiver Brandon Marshall, and a promising young offense. Many believed Denver was only a few pieces away from returning to playoff contention. Then McDaniels made his first major decision. He traded Jay Cutler. The relationship between the young coach and Pro Bowl quarterback quickly deteriorated after McDaniels explored the possibility of acquiring Matt Castle from New England. Cutler felt the organization had lost faith in him, and Denver eventually sent him to Chicago in exchange for multiple draft picks. The move instantly changed the direction of the franchise. To replace Cutler, McDaniels drafted quarterback Tim Tebow in the first round of the 2010 NFL Draft, despite Tebow being viewed by many scouts as a developmental project. At the same time, the Broncos struggled defensively and lost several key players, including Brandon Marshall, who was traded to Miami. Despite starting his tenure 6-0 in 2009, the season collapsed. Denver lost 8 of its final 10 games, finished 8-8, and missed the playoffs. The following season was even worse. The Broncos started 3-9. The defense allowed the most points in franchise history, and tensions grew between McDaniels and the locker room. The breaking point came when McDaniels was accused of involvement in a videotaping scandal involving the San Francisco 49ers. Denver fired him after Week 13 of the 2010 season. McDaniels finished with an 11-17 record. The damage lasted far beyond his time in Denver. The Broncos spent years searching for a quarterback after trading Cutler, struggled through multiple coaching changes, and only recovered after Peyton Manning arrived in 2012. Josh McDaniels arrived promising to build the next Patriots dynasty. Instead, he became one of the clearest examples of how quickly a promising franchise can lose its direction. San Francisco 49ers, Chip Kelly, 2016. When the San Francisco 49ers hired Chip Kelly in 2016, They believed they were getting one of the most innovative offensive minds in football. Kelly had transformed college football at Oregon with his fast-paced offense before becoming an NFL head coach with the Philadelphia Eagles. His first season in Philadelphia produced a 10-6 record and a division title, making him one of the league's most exciting young coaches. But by the time San Francisco hired him, the warning signs were already there. The Eagles had fired Kelly after he gained complete control over personnel decisions and made several controversial roster moves, including trading away star players like LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson. Still, the 49ers believed his offensive creativity could revive an organization searching for direction after Jim Harbaugh's departure. Instead, Kelly inherited a team already in decline. The 49ers had gone 5-11 in 2015 and lacked talent throughout the roster. Quarterback Colin Kaepernick was coming off an injury-plagued season and eventually lost his starting job before returning later in the year. Kelly's offense struggled to create explosive plays, and the defense couldn't keep games competitive. San Francisco opened the season 1-5 and never recovered. The 49ers finished 2016 with a 2-14 record, losing their final 13 games of the season. They ranked 27th in scoring offense, allowed more than 30 points per game during their losing streak, and looked completely disconnected on both sides of the ball. The biggest problem was that Kelly's system never matched the roster. His fast-paced approach required specific personnel, but the 49ers lacked the offensive line and quarterback stability needed to make it work. After only one season, San Francisco fired Kelly and general manager Trent Baalke. The franchise entered another rebuild, eventually hiring Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch in 2017. Kelly's record with the 49ers was 2-14, but the consequences went deeper. San Francisco spent years recovering from the instability that followed the end of the Harbaugh era, cycling through coaches, quarterbacks, and philosophies. The Chip Kelly experiment proved that innovation alone isn't enough. A great offensive system still needs the right environment, roster, and leadership to succeed. Oakland Raiders, Josh McDaniels, 2022. Josh McDaniels gets another appearance on this list because his second chance as an NFL head coach ended in an even more damaging way. After his failure in Denver, many believed McDaniels had matured. His years as a Patriots assistant and offensive coordinator restored his reputation. And when the Las Vegas Raiders hired him in 2022, the expectation was that he could finally prove he was ready to lead a franchise. The situation looked promising. The Raiders were coming off a playoff appearance in 2021. They had star receiver Davante Adams, elite pass rusher Max Crosby, and quarterback Derek Carr, who had just signed a contract extension. The organization believed McDaniels and general manager Dave Ziegler could build a championship contender. Instead, the entire operation collapsed. One of McDaniels' first major moves was reuniting with former Patriots star Chandler Jones, who signed a lucrative contract but struggled to make an impact and later became involved in public disputes with the organization. Meanwhile, McDaniels and Ziegler traded for Davante Adams and brought in quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo after deciding to move on from Carr. The changes created immediate instability. Las Vegas started the 2022 season 2-7. Despite having one of the league's most talented offensive weapons, several games featured massive blown leads, including a collapse against Arizona, where the Raiders lost a 20-0 halftime advantage in overtime. The team finished 6-11, and expectations for improvement disappeared. The 2023 season started even worse. The Raiders fell to 3-5, the offense struggled, and frustration grew inside the building. Reports surfaced about players questioning the direction of the team, and owner Mark Davis eventually made the decision to fire McDaniels after only 8 games. McDaniels finished his Raiders tenure with a 9-16 record. The damage was significant because Las Vegas had a playoff-caliber roster before the hire. Instead of building momentum, the franchise entered another rebuild, moved on from key veterans, and spent more years searching for stability. For a coach who once looked like a future star, McDaniel's 2 NFL head coaching failures became a cautionary tale about the difference between being a great coordinator and being the person responsible for an entire franchise. Detroit Lions, Matt Patricia, 2018. The Detroit Lions believed Matt Patricia was the coach who could finally change the culture of a franchise that had spent decades searching for consistency. After years of rebuilding under Jim Caldwell, Detroit decided that being competitive wasn't enough. Caldwell had posted a 36-28 record and led the Lions to 2 playoff appearances in 4 seasons. But owner Martha Ford wanted a coach who could take the team to the next level. The answer appeared to be Matt Patricia. Patricia arrived from New England with the reputation of being a defensive mastermind. As the Patriots' defensive coordinator, he helped build the defense that defeated the high-powered Los Angeles Rams in Super Bowl 53. Detroit believed they were hiring another piece of the Patriots' winning formula. Instead, they got one of the most disappointing coaching tenures in franchise history. Patricia immediately focused on changing the culture. He preached toughness, accountability, and a do-your-job mentality. But almost from the beginning, players struggled to connect with his approach. Several veterans felt the environment became overly strict, and the coach, who was supposed to create discipline, instead created tension. The results on the field were even worse. Detroit started the 2018 season with a shocking 48-17 victory over the New York Jets, creating optimism that Patricia could turn things around. But the Lions finished the year 6-10 after losing 6 of their final 8 games. The 2019 season was another disaster. Detroit went 3-12-1, blowing multiple late leads and finishing with one of the worst defenses in football. Despite having quarterback Matthew Stafford playing at a high level before a back injury ended his season, the Lions could not create a winning formula. The biggest criticism of Patricia was his failure to improve the defense. The Lions ranked 31st in total defense in 2019 and continued giving up explosive plays despite Patricia's defensive background. In 2020, Detroit collapsed completely. After starting the season 4-7, Patricia was fired following a Thanksgiving loss to the Houston Texans. He finished his Lions tenure with a 13-29-1 record, one of the worst winning percentages in franchise history. The damage went beyond the losses. Patricia's tenure wasted valuable years of Matthew Stafford's career and contributed to the quarterback eventually requesting a trade. Detroit was forced into another rebuild, eventually moving Stafford to Los Angeles and starting over under Dan Campbell. Matt Patricia was hired to bring the Patriot way to Detroit. Instead, he became another chapter in the Lions' long search for an identity. New York Jets, Adam Gase, 2019. Few coaching hires entered with as much skepticism as Adam Gase joining the New York Jets in 2019. The Jets believed they were hiring an offensive genius who could unlock the potential of young quarterback Sam Darnold. Gase had previously worked with Peyton Manning in Denver and helped guide the Broncos to a Super Bowl appearance. He also served as head coach of the Miami Dolphins, where he showed flashes of success. But by the time he arrived in New York, many questioned whether he was actually the right person to lead the franchise. The warning signs appeared immediately. Gase's first season began with disaster. The Jets lost their opener 33-0 to the New England Patriots, and the offense looked completely unprepared. Darnold missed time after being diagnosed with mononucleosis, and the team struggled to establish any rhythm. Eventually, New York showed some improvement. Behind a stronger second half of the season, the Jets finished 7-9, and some believed Gase had stabilized the team. That optimism disappeared in 2020. The Jets became one of the worst teams in football. They started the season 0-13, suffered embarrassing losses, and appeared completely disconnected. The offense ranked near the bottom of the league, Darnold regressed, and questions grew about Gase's ability to develop young talent.
New York finally won 2 late-season games, preventing a winless season, but it wasn't enough. Gase was fired after finishing his Jets tenure with a 9-23 record. The consequences were enormous. The Jets wasted critical development years for Sam Darnold, eventually trading him away and starting another quarterback search. They also created a dysfunctional environment that contributed to years of instability. The biggest criticism of Gase wasn't just that he lost games. It was that he was hired specifically to fix the offense and develop a young quarterback. Yet the Jets ended up needing to restart the exact process he was brought in to solve. Adam Gase arrived in New York, promising to unlock the franchise's future. Instead, he became another reason the Jets remained stuck in the past. Cleveland Browns, Hugh Jackson, 2016. Few coaching hires in NFL history had a worse combination of expectations, opportunity, and results than Hugh Jackson with the Cleveland Browns. When Cleveland hired Jackson in 2016, many believed he was finally the coach who could bring stability to a franchise that had been searching for answers since its return to the NFL in 1999. Jackson had a strong reputation as an offensive mind, had helped develop quarterbacks, and was coming off a successful stint as offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Browns believed he could build something sustainable. Instead, his tenure became one of the darkest periods in franchise history. Jackson's first season was a disaster. Cleveland finished 1-15 in 2016, tying the worst record in team history. The quarterback situation was constantly changing, with Robert Griffin III, Cody Kessler, and Josh McCown all seeing time under center. The offense ranked near the bottom of the league, and the defense struggled to keep games competitive. But the franchise continued supporting Jackson. In 2017, Cleveland entered the season with rookie quarterback DeShone Kizer and high expectations that the rebuild was finally moving forward. Instead, the Browns became one of the worst teams in modern NFL history. They finished 0-16. The offense averaged only 14.6 points per game. Kizer threw 22 interceptions, and the Browns became the second team ever to finish a full season without a victory. The only other team to accomplish that was the 2008 Detroit Lions. Despite the historic failure, Jackson returned for 2018. That season began differently. Rookie quarterback Baker Mayfield provided hope, and Cleveland finally looked competitive. But after a 2-5-1 start, the Browns fired Jackson. His final record in Cleveland was 3-36-1. The numbers were almost impossible to believe. Jackson lost more games in Cleveland than some coaches lose in an entire career. His tenure created years of quarterback uncertainty, coaching instability, and organizational dysfunction. While the Browns eventually found hope with Baker Mayfield, Myles Garrett, and Kevin Stefanski, the Jackson era delayed the franchise's turnaround and became the defining example of Cleveland's struggles during that period. Hugh Jackson wasn't just a failed hire. He represented a franchise that kept searching for answers while repeatedly making the same mistakes. Jacksonville Jaguars, Urban Meyer, 2021. Few coaching hires entered the NFL with as much excitement as Urban Meyer joining the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2021. The Jaguars believed they had found the perfect person to lead their rebuild. Meyer had won 3 national championships in college football, developed elite talent at Ohio State and Florida, and built a reputation as one of the greatest college coaches ever. Jacksonville was coming off a 1-15 season, had the first overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, and was preparing to select generational quarterback prospect Trevor Lawrence. The timing seemed perfect. The Jaguars believed Meyer could bring a winning culture to a franchise that desperately needed one. Instead, the experiment collapsed almost immediately. From the beginning, Meyer struggled with the transition from college football to the NFL. Players reportedly questioned his leadership style, his communication, and his understanding of professional athletes. Instead of earning the trust of the locker room, Meyer quickly created tension inside the building.
The football results were just as bad. Jacksonville opened the 2021 season with a 1-4 record and struggled on both sides of the ball. Trevor Lawrence showed flashes of why he was considered a generational prospect, but the offense lacked consistency, and the team failed to establish any identity. Then came a series of controversies that completely overshadowed football. Meyer was criticized after video surfaced of him at a bar with a woman who was not his wife, after he chose not to immediately return home with the team following a loss. He later apologized, but the damage was done. More reports followed. Players questioned his treatment of the roster. Former kicker Josh Lambo accused Meyer of kicking him during practice. Reports also surfaced that Meyer called assistant coaches losers and created an uncomfortable atmosphere inside the organization. By December, the Jaguars had seen enough. After a 20-0 loss to the Tennessee Titans dropped Jacksonville to 2-11, the team fired Meyer after only 13 games. He finished with a 2-11 record, making him one of the shortest tenured head coaches in modern NFL history. The consequences were significant. Jacksonville spent the next several seasons repairing the culture Meyer damaged while trying to develop Trevor Lawrence into the franchise quarterback they hoped he would become. Urban Meyer arrived with one of the greatest resumes in football history. But the NFL quickly proved that college success does not guarantee professional leadership. Dallas Cowboys, Dave Campo, 2000. The Dallas Cowboys entered the 2000s facing one of the toughest transitions in franchise history. The dynasty of the 1990s was officially coming to an end. Under Jimmy Johnson and later Barry Switzer, Dallas had won 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons. But by the time the new millennium arrived, the roster was aging and the championship core was disappearing. After Switzer retired following the 1997 season, the Cowboys hired Chan Gailey and later Dave Campo, hoping an internal promotion could maintain the winning culture. Campo had been Dallas's defensive coordinator and was highly respected inside the organization. Owner Jerry Jones believed promoting from within would provide continuity and prevent a complete rebuild. Instead, the Cowboys entered one of their longest stretches of mediocrity. Campo took over in 2000 with a roster that still had veterans like Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. But the team's championship foundation had already started falling apart. Aikman retired after the season, Irvin was forced to retire due to injury, and Dallas entered a new era without a clear replacement plan. Campo's first season ended 5-11. The following year was even worse. The Cowboys finished 5-11 again in 2001, and the offense ranked near the bottom of the league. Quarterback play became a major problem, with Quincy Carter eventually taking over after Dallas struggled to replace Aikman. In 2002, the Cowboys improved slightly, but still finished just 5-11, marking 3 straight losing seasons under Campo. It was the first time since the early 1980s that Dallas had experienced 3 consecutive losing seasons. Campo finished his Cowboys tenure with a 15-33 record. The problem wasn't simply that Campo lost games. The Cowboys were already declining, but his hiring represented a failure to recognize the need for a major rebuild. Instead of finding a coach capable of creating a new era, Dallas attempted to preserve the past. The Cowboys eventually recovered under Bill Parcells in 2003, but Campo's tenure delayed the franchise's return to relevance and marked the end of the dynasty era. New England Patriots, Rod Rust, 1990. Before Bill Belichick and Tom Brady turned New England into the NFL's greatest modern dynasty, the Patriots spent decades searching for stability. One of the lowest points came with the hiring of Rod Rust in 1990. Rust was a respected defensive coach who had spent years as an assistant in the NFL. New England believed his experience could help rebuild a struggling franchise that had finished 5-11 the previous season. Instead, the Patriots immediately became one of the worst teams in football. New England opened the 1990 season with 7 consecutive losses and never recovered.
The offense struggled with quarterback play. The defense allowed points at an alarming rate, and the team finished 1-15, tying the worst record in franchise history. The Patriots were outscored 446 to 181 during the season and lost their final 14 games after winning their opener against Indianapolis. The problems went beyond the record. The organization was already dealing with instability after the ownership issues surrounding Victor Kayam, and Rust was unable to establish any foundation. The team lacked talent, direction, and confidence, making his job nearly impossible. After only one season, New England fired Rust. His final record was 1-15, and the Patriots entered another rebuilding phase. Although the franchise eventually found success under Bill Parcells in the mid-1990s and later Belichick, the Rust era represented one of the darkest periods in team history. The hire didn't set the Patriots back because of one bad season alone. It represented an organization without a clear plan, searching for answers while falling further behind.
Arizona Cardinals, founded 1898. The Cardinals aren't just the oldest NFL franchise. They predate the NFL itself by over 2 decades. The team was originally founded in 1898 in Chicago by a group of neighborhood athletes who played on a sandlot field. Back then, they were called the Morgan Athletic Club, and there was no league, just local competition and loose scheduling. The team changed names shortly after to the Racine Normals, based on the street they played on, Racine Avenue in Chicago. In 1901, they got their first real uniforms, a set of used, faded maroon jerseys from the University of Chicago. When team owner Chris O'Brien saw them, he declared the color wasn't maroon, it was cardinal red. The name stuck. They became the Racine Cardinals, and kept that name when they joined the NFL in 1920 as one of its charter members. They won NFL titles in 1925 and 1947, but struggled with attendance and money in a crowded Chicago market, where the Chicago Bears dominated the spotlight. So in 1960, the Cardinals moved to St. Louis, where they were known as the St. Louis Cardinals, sharing the name with the city's baseball team. They stayed in St. Louis for nearly 3 decades, but never found long-term success. In 1988, the team relocated again, this time to Phoenix, Arizona, and eventually rebranded in 1994 as the Arizona Cardinals to represent the entire state. Chicago Bears, founded 1919. The Chicago Bears trace their roots back to 1919, when they were founded by the A.E. Staley Company, a starch manufacturer in Decatur, Illinois. The team was originally known as the Decatur Staleys, and they were created as a company-sponsored squad, part athletic club, part public relations tool. But this wasn't a beer league operation. They paid their players and took football seriously from day one. In 1920, the Staleys joined the newly formed American Professional Football Association, the league that would become the NFL in 1922. The team was managed and coached by a 25-year-old named George Halas, a former University of Illinois standout and Navy veteran. He quickly became the face of the franchise, and later the league itself. In 1921, Halas convinced the Staley Company to let him move the team to Chicago. As part of the deal, he kept the name Staley's for 1 more year, and then rebranded in 1922 as the Chicago Bears. The name was a nod to the city's baseball team, the Cubs. Halas figured if the Cubs played baseball, the bigger, rougher Bears should play football. From there, the Bears became a cornerstone of the NFL. They won their first league title in 1921, then added 8 more championships before the Super Bowl era. They were known for hard-nosed, ground-and-pound football, exemplified by the legendary Bronco Nagurski, and later by the revolutionary T-formation offense, which Halas helped pioneer in the 1940s. Under Halas, the Bears became a dynasty and helped stabilize the NFL during its early, volatile years. Halas coached the team for 40 seasons, won 324 games, and left behind a legacy that still shapes the league. Green Bay Packers, founded 1919. The team was founded in 1919 by Curly Lambeau and George Calhoun, two former high school teammates who wanted to start a semi-pro team in their hometown of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Lambeau worked for the Indian Packing Company, which agreed to fund the team with $500 for uniforms and equipment. In exchange, the team would be named after the company. That's how the name Packers was born. In 1921, the Packers joined the NFL. They were almost immediately kicked out for using college players illegally, but were reinstated the same year, marking the true beginning of what would become the third oldest franchise in the league. The Packers faced unique challenges. Green Bay was, and still is, the smallest market in major professional sports. Most early NFL teams were folding or relocating to larger cities, but the Packers survived thanks to something no other team had: community ownership. In 1923, the team was reorganized as a nonprofit, publicly owned corporation, funded by local fans and businesses. That model still exists today, with over 500,000 shareholders who collectively own the team. It's the only structure of its kind in American sports. Under Curly Lambeau, the Packers became a powerhouse in the 1920s and 30s, winning 6 NFL championships. In the 1960s, under legendary coach Vince Lombardi, they added 5 more, including victories in the first 2 Super Bowls. Their home stadium, Lambeau Field, opened in 1957 and is now considered hallowed ground, a symbol of tradition, loyalty, and frigid playoff games. New York Giants, founded 1925. In the early 1920s, professional football was still considered second class compared to the college game. Most NFL teams were based in small towns like Canton or Rock Island. The league knew that to grow, it needed a presence in the country's biggest city, New York. So in 1925, the NFL awarded a franchise to Tim Mara, a bookmaker and businessman who had never even seen a football game. The price? Just $500. Roughly $8,000 in today's money. He named the team the New York Giants, borrowing the name from the city's already established baseball team, a common move back then. But unlike many startup franchises that folded quickly, Mara's Giants gave the NFL credibility. They were the league's first big market team, and their success helped professional football shed its backwater image. The team played its first season at the Polo Grounds in Manhattan and quickly built a following. By 1927, they won their first NFL championship, and in the 1930s and 40s, they became a consistent powerhouse, appearing in 8 championship games before the Super Bowl era. Owned by the Mara family for 4 generations, the Giants are one of only a few franchises that have remained in the same city with the same name since their founding. Detroit Lions, founded 1930. The Detroit Lions weren't always Detroit's team. They were born as a small-town franchise in Portsmouth, Ohio. In 1930, a group of businessmen founded the Portsmouth Spartans, a scrappy team in a working-class river town with a population under 50,000. Despite their size, the Spartans held their own against bigger city franchises, even finishing second in the league in 1932. That 1932 season ended in a moment that changed NFL history. The Spartans faced the Bears in a postseason showdown at Chicago Stadium, indoors, on an 80-yard field, with dirt and hash marks drawn in chalk. It was the first NFL playoff game, and it led the league to adopt divisional play and a formal championship game starting the following season. But the Great Depression hit small-town teams hard. Portsmouth couldn't financially sustain a pro team, and in 1934, the franchise was bought by Detroit radio executive George A. Richards and moved to Detroit. They were renamed the Lions to align with the Detroit Tigers baseball team, and because, as Richards put it, a lion is the king of the jungle, and we hope to be the kings of the NFL. The move paid off quickly. In their first season in Detroit, the Lions went 10-3 and became a marquee team. They also established one of the NFL's most enduring traditions, the Thanksgiving Day game, which started in 1934 as a promotional idea by Richards, and still continues today. Washington Commanders, founded 1932. In 1932, the NFL granted a franchise to George Preston Marshall, a successful laundry businessman in Boston. He named the team the Boston Braves, and they shared a stadium and a name with the city's baseball team. But in 1933, the football team moved to Fenway Park, home of the Red Sox. To avoid confusion and carve out its own identity, Marshall renamed the team the Boston Redskins. He kept the Native American branding and hired Lone Star Dietz, who claimed Native ancestry, as head coach, a controversial decision that would spark debate for decades. Despite some early success, including the 1936 NFL championship game, Boston fans didn't embrace the team. Poor attendance and a strained relationship with the city pushed Marshall to move the franchise in 1937 to Washington, D.C., where it immediately found a fan base and a fresh start. The team's first season in Washington was a dream. Rookie quarterback Sammy Baugh led them to an NFL championship in 1937 and another in 1942. Over the next few decades, Washington became one of the NFL's most popular teams, especially during the televised boom of the 1970s and 80s. Under head coach Joe Gibbs, they won 3 Super Bowls, solidifying their reputation as a powerhouse franchise. However, the team's original name and imagery became increasingly controversial. After decades of protest, mounting public pressure, and sponsor backlash, the organization officially retired the Redskins name in 2020. They played 2 seasons as the Washington football team, and in 2022, rebranded as the Washington Commanders. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Pittsburgh Steelers, founded 1933. The Pittsburgh Steelers were born in 1933, but not under that name. That year, Pennsylvania finally legalized professional football, allowing the NFL to expand into the state. Art Rooney, a local boxing promoter and businessman, paid $2,500 for a franchise and named the team the Pittsburgh Pirates, after the city's popular baseball team. But success didn't come quickly. For the first 7 years, the Pirates were one of the worst teams in the league, cycling through coaches, struggling to find talent, and finishing with a losing record every season. The turning point came in 1940, when Rooney renamed the team the Steelers, a nod to Pittsburgh's identity as the steel capital of the world. World War II caused player shortages, so the Steelers were forced to merge with other teams just to field a roster. In 1943, they became the Steagles after temporarily joining with the Eagles. In 1944, they merged again, this time with the Chicago Cardinals, forming a short-lived and historically terrible team known unofficially as Card Pit. The post-war years were rocky, but the Steelers slowly began to find their footing. Still, it wasn't until the 1970s that the franchise transformed into a powerhouse. Under head coach Chuck Noll, Pittsburgh built a dynasty. They drafted legends like Terry Bradshaw, Joe Green, Franco Harris, Mel Blount, Jack Lambert, and Lynn Swann, and won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. Philadelphia Eagles, founded 1933. In 1931, the NFL's Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, a team based in Northeast Philadelphia, folded due to financial struggles and a stadium fire. 2 years later, in 1933, the NFL wanted to reestablish a presence in the city, so it awarded a new franchise to Pennsylvania businessmen Bert Bell and Lud Ray for $2,500. That team became the Philadelphia Eagles, named after the Blue Eagle, a symbol of the National Recovery Administration, a New Deal program launched during the Great Depression. The name was a nod to American resilience and rebirth. Like many early NFL franchises, the Eagles got off to a rough start. They didn't record a winning season until 1943, and during World War II, they were temporarily merged with the Pittsburgh Steelers to form the Steagles due to league-wide player shortages. The real breakthrough came in the late 1940s. With head coach Greasy Neal and Hall of Fame running back Steve Van Buren, the Eagles won back-to-back NFL championships in 1948 and 1949, including a 1948 title game played in a blizzard. The only score came from a Van Buren touchdown. The Eagles became known for their gritty style, loyal fan base, and defensive identity, traits that still define the franchise today. They moved into Franklin Field, then Veterans Stadium, and later Lincoln Financial Field. But the passion in the stands never changed. It took nearly 60 more years to win another title, but in 2017, the Eagles captured their first Super Bowl, completing a story that started nearly a century earlier with a symbol of hope during America's hardest times. Cleveland Browns, founded 1946. In 1944, Cleveland businessman Arthur Mickey McBride secured the rights to a new pro football team in the upstart All-America Football Conference, AAFC, a league created to rival the NFL. To build his franchise, McBride hired a young, no-nonsense coach from Ohio State, Paul Brown, and that decision changed football history. Brown brought a revolutionary approach to the game. He introduced things we now take for granted: film study, playbooks, scouting departments, and full-time coaching staffs. He ran the Browns like a machine, and in their very first season in 1946, they went 12-2 and won the AAFC championship. They didn't stop there. The Browns won 4 straight AAFC titles, with stars like Otto Graham and Marion Motley. They were so dominant that when the AAFC folded in 1949, the NFL had no choice but to absorb them, even though many owners feared they were too good. The Browns joined the NFL in 1950 and immediately proved the doubters wrong by winning the NFL championship in their very first season, beating the Rams in a thriller. Throughout the 1950s and early 60s, the Browns remained one of the league's top teams. Paul Brown eventually clashed with ownership and was fired in 1963, but his blueprint stayed in place. In 1964, with Jim Brown at running back, one of the greatest players of all time, Cleveland won another NFL championship, still their last title to this day. The team moved to the new AFC after the 1970 NFL-AFL merger, but the most dramatic moment in franchise history came in 1995, when owner Art Modell controversially moved the team to Baltimore. The NFL suspended operations for the Browns, but promised the city the name, colors, and history would remain. In 1999, the Browns were officially reactivated as an expansion franchise, picking up where they left off, with one of the most loyal, passionate fan bases in the league, San Francisco 49ers, founded 1946. The San Francisco 49ers were the first major professional sports franchise based on the West Coast, and their story begins in the post-World War II boom of 1946. Founded by lumber magnate Tony Morabito, the team was created to bring pro football to a region that had been largely ignored by the major leagues. Morabito had long believed that the NFL needed a West Coast presence. After being rejected multiple times by the NFL, he turned to the newly formed All-America Football Conference, the same league that launched the Cleveland Browns. He was granted a franchise and named the team the 49ers, a tribute to the fortune seekers of the 1849 California Gold Rush, a symbol of risk-taking and adventure that fit perfectly with San Francisco's identity. The team played its first games at Kezar Stadium in Golden Gate Park, and while they were often overshadowed by Paul Brown's powerhouse Browns, the 49ers were competitive and popular right out of the gate. In 1949, when the AAFC merged with the NFL, the 49ers were one of only 3 teams to survive the merger, but early NFL success was slow. For decades, the 49ers were competitive, but never champions. That all changed in the 1980s. The hiring of Bill Walsh in 1979 brought in a new philosophy: the West Coast offense, a short-passing, timing-based system that revolutionized football. With quarterback Joe Montana and later Steve Young, wide receiver Jerry Rice, and a defense anchored by Ronnie Lott, the 49ers became a dynasty. Between 1981 and 1994, they won 5 Super Bowls, cementing themselves as one of the greatest franchises in NFL history. Los Angeles Rams, founded 1936. The Rams' story begins not in California, but in the industrial Midwest. They were founded in 1936 as the Cleveland Rams, joining the NFL as part of the league's slow expansion during the Great Depression. After a few rocky seasons, the franchise found success, winning the NFL championship in 1945, led by quarterback Bob Waterfield. But then, something almost unheard of happened. Just 1 month after winning the title, the team left Cleveland. Owner Dan Reeves saw bigger opportunities out west. With the country emerging from World War II and the population booming in California, he decided to move the team to Los Angeles, making the Rams the first NFL franchise to play on the West Coast. Their new home was the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, a massive 90,000-seat stadium that gave the Rams instant visibility. But there was one condition: the Coliseum Commission required the team to be racially integrated if they were to play there. So in 1946, the Rams signed Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, two former UCLA stars, making them the first black players in the modern NFL era, a full year before Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier. That move helped reshape the league's future. Through the 1950s and 60s, the Rams developed a reputation for innovation and star power, with players like Norm Van Brocklin and later the fearsome defensive line known as the Fearsome Foursome. They moved to Anaheim in 1980, but stayed rooted in the Southern California identity. In 1995, the team relocated again, this time to St. Louis, where they'd win Super Bowl 34 with the greatest show on turf, led by Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, and Isaac Bruce. But in 2016, the Rams returned to Los Angeles, becoming the centerpiece of the NFL's new Hollywood vision. In 2021, they christened SoFi Stadium with a Super Bowl win, their first in LA, and fully re-established themselves as a West Coast powerhouse. Indianapolis Colts, founded 1953. The origins of the Colts franchise are a bit tangled, involving failed teams, a last-minute revival, and one of the most infamous relocations in NFL history. It starts with Baltimore, a city that had briefly hosted a team called the Colts in the early 1950s. That version of the franchise folded in 1951, but just 2 years later in 1953, NFL owners approved a new team for Baltimore, using the same Colts name, colors, and fan identity. It wasn't technically the same franchise on paper, but for fans, the reborn Colts were a continuation of their team. Under ownership from Carroll Rosenblum, the Baltimore Colts became one of the league's most respected franchises. They drafted quarterback Johnny Unitas in 1956, and that changed everything. Unitas wasn't just good, he was a revolution. With his poise, arm strength, and leadership, he helped usher in the modern passing game. The Colts' 1958 NFL championship win over the Giants, a dramatic overtime thriller, became known as the greatest game ever played. It helped launch pro football into the national consciousness and made the Colts a household name. The team won NFL titles in 1958, 1959, and 1968, and finally captured Super Bowl V in 1970. But behind the scenes, the team was struggling with financial issues and stadium concerns. After years of disputes with the city of Baltimore, owner Robert Irsay made a controversial decision in 1984. He moved the Colts to Indianapolis and did it literally overnight, using Mayflower moving trucks under the cover of darkness. It became one of the most dramatic and bitter relocations in sports history. Despite the rocky start in Indiana, the Colts rebuilt, slowly. In 2006, they won Super Bowl 41, and even after Manning left, the team struck gold again with Andrew Luck. Buffalo Bills, founded 1960. Buffalo had a brief NFL history in the 1920s, but by mid-century it was without a team. That changed when Ralph Wilson, a Detroit-based businessman and one of the AFL's founding owners, brought pro football back to Western New York. He named the team the Buffalo Bills, inspired by a previous Buffalo franchise and the famous Wild West showman, Buffalo Bill Cody. Wilson's franchise quickly built a blue-collar identity, matching the spirit of the city it represented. The team's original stadium was War Memorial Stadium, affectionately called the Rock Pile, and it created one of the most passionate fan bases in football, the start of what would become Bills Mafia. The Bills found early success in the AFL. Led by legendary coach Lou Saban and quarterback Jack Kemp, they won back-to-back AFL championships in 1964 and 1965. But the real golden era came in the late 1980s and early 90s. Under head coach Marv Levy and general manager Bill Polian, the Bills built a juggernaut. With stars like Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and Bruce Smith, Buffalo made an unprecedented 4 straight Super Bowl appearances, from 1990 to 1993. No team in NFL history has ever matched that streak, but heartbreak followed each time, with the Bills losing all 4 Super Bowls. With Josh Allen at quarterback and a re-energized defense, the Bills are once again a Super Bowl contender, and Buffalo is alive with belief again. Denver Broncos, founded 1960. Denver was not considered a prime football market at the time. The Broncos had one of the league's smallest stadiums, the least funding, and, perhaps worst of all, some of the worst uniforms in football history, famously featuring mustard yellow jerseys with vertically striped socks. But despite the rocky start, the team's presence in the Mile High City helped turn Denver into a football town. The fans were loyal, even as the team struggled through 10 straight losing seasons after its founding. Things began to shift in the 1970s. The team moved into Mile High Stadium, and the arrival of head coach Red Miller and the legendary Orange Crush defense gave Denver its first identity as a contender. In 1977, the Broncos reached Super Bowl 12, their first appearance. Even though they lost to the Cowboys, the stage was set. But the defining era of Broncos football began in 1983, when they pulled off one of the biggest draft trades in history. Quarterback John Elway, who had refused to play for the Baltimore Colts, was acquired by Denver in a franchise-changing move. Elway would become the face of the team for nearly 2 decades, leading the Broncos to 5 Super Bowl appearances and 3 AFC titles throughout his career. After Elway's retirement, the team went through a transitional period until another star quarterback arrived, Peyton Manning. In 2012, Denver signed the future Hall of Famer, and within a few years, the Broncos were once again at the top of the league. Kansas City Chiefs, founded 1960 as Dallas Texans. The franchise we know today as the Kansas City Chiefs actually began as the Dallas Texans, one of the original 8 teams in the American Football League in 1960. The team was founded by Lamar Hunt, the son of a Texas oil tycoon who had been repeatedly denied an NFL franchise. So he created his own league, the AFL, and put a team in Dallas to compete directly with the NFL's new expansion team, the Cowboys. That rivalry couldn't last. Despite early success, including an AFL championship in 1962, the Texans struggled for fan attention in Dallas. So Hunt made a bold decision. He moved the team to Kansas City in 1963 and rebranded them as the Chiefs, a name chosen to honor the nickname of Kansas City Mayor Harold Roe Bartle, who had been instrumental in bringing the team to town. It didn't take long for the Chiefs to become one of the AFL's most successful teams. Under head coach Hank Stram, and with stars like Len Dawson, Bobby Bell, and Willie Lanier, the Chiefs won 3 AFL championships, including a win in the final AFL-NFL championship game before the merger, Super Bowl IV in 1970, where they upset the heavily favored Minnesota Vikings. That win helped legitimize the AFL as equal to the NFL and solidified Kansas City's place in football history. After that early peak, the Chiefs went into a decades-long drought with few playoff appearances and no Super Bowl trips. But they remained beloved in Kansas City, with one of the loudest and most loyal fan bases in the NFL at Arrowhead Stadium, which opened in 1972 and has become legendary for its deafening noise. Everything changed in the late 2010s, when head coach Andy Reid and general manager Brett Veach built a new powerhouse, centered around quarterback Patrick Mahomes, the 10th overall pick in the 2017 draft. With Mahomes, the Chiefs transformed into an offensive juggernaut. Dallas Cowboys, founded 1960. In the late 1950s, pro football had exploded in popularity across the U.S., but Texas, the heartland of high school and college football, had no NFL franchise. Oilman Clint Murchison Jr. saw an opportunity. He secured the rights to a team in 1960, but there was a catch. The NFL was hesitant to expand into Dallas because the rival AFL had already awarded a franchise there. So Murchison played a brilliant hand. He purchased the rights to the Washington Redskins fight song, "Hail to the Redskins," from the composer, who had a grudge against Washington's owner. Then, Murchison used it as leverage. Either approve the Cowboys as a franchise or lose your fight song. It worked. The NFL granted Dallas its first ever team, and the Cowboys were born. From the start, the team had a modern vision. They hired Tom Landry, a former Giants defensive coordinator, known for his stoic presence and innovation. Landry created the flex defense, brought in advanced scouting, and helped establish Dallas as a forward-thinking operation, even if their early years were brutal. The Cowboys went winless in their debut season, but by the late 1960s, they became a juggernaut. They reached 5 Super Bowls in the 1970s, winning 2, and cemented themselves as the most glamorous franchise in the league. By the 1990s, under the flamboyant ownership of Jerry Jones, the Cowboys entered their second dynasty. Behind Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and head coach Jimmy Johnson, Dallas won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, dominating the decade. Nicknamed America's Team due to their nationwide following and iconic star logo, the Cowboys became more than just a football franchise. They were a brand, a symbol of winning, and a cultural touchstone. Las Vegas Raiders, founded 1960. They were originally founded in 1960 as the Oakland Raiders, joining the AFL as a late addition after the Minnesota Vikings backed out to join the NFL. With little time to prepare, Oakland scrambled to build a roster and a brand, and the early years were rough. But that all changed when Al Davis arrived. In 1963, Davis became the team's head coach and eventually the controlling owner. He brought swagger, defiance, and a win-at-all-costs mentality. Under his leadership, the Raiders adopted the iconic silver and black colors and a rebellious identity. Just win, baby. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, the Raiders became one of the most feared teams in football, led by legends like Ken Stabler, Fred Biletnikoff, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell, and John Madden as head coach. The Raiders won their first Super Bowl in 1976. But the Raiders were never stationary for long. In 1982, frustrated with stadium issues in Oakland, Davis moved the team to Los Angeles, becoming the LA Raiders. There, they reached new heights, winning Super Bowl XVIII in 1983 with a dominant performance against Washington. By 1995, the team moved back to Oakland, but the relationship between the franchise and the city never truly healed. The stadium situation remained poor, and despite some flashes of success, like their Super Bowl run in 2002, the Raiders struggled with consistency. Eventually, Al Davis's son, Mark Davis, inherited the team and sought a long-term solution. He found it in Las Vegas. In 2020, the franchise officially became the Las Vegas Raiders, moving into the state-of-the-art Allegiant Stadium just off the Vegas Strip. It marked the first NFL team in Nevada, and while it was a controversial move, it gave the Raiders a modern home, something they had long lacked. Los Angeles Chargers, founded 1960. The Los Angeles Chargers were one of the original 8 AFL franchises, founded in 1960 by hotel heir Baron Hilton, son of the Hilton Hotels empire. The team was based in Los Angeles for just 1 season before moving to San Diego in 1961. A decision driven by low attendance and the belief that a smaller market would offer a more passionate fan base. In San Diego, the Chargers quickly became one of the AFL's strongest franchises. Under head coach Sid Gilman, a visionary offensive mind, the team revolutionized the passing game. Gilman's offenses were vertical, fast-paced, and years ahead of their time, laying the groundwork for the modern NFL aerial attack. The Chargers made 5 AFL championship appearances in the 1960s and won their only league title in 1963, dominating the Boston Patriots 51-10. That remains the franchise's lone league championship. During their San Diego years, the team became known for electric players like Kellen Winslow and LaDainian Tomlinson. In the 2000s, San Diego saw a resurgence under head coach Marty Schottenheimer and later Norv Turner, with Tomlinson setting touchdown records and Phillip Rivers emerging as a durable, gunslinging quarterback. But despite deep playoff runs and talent across the roster, a Super Bowl appearance always remained just out of reach. Then came the controversial move. In 2017, after years of failed negotiations for a new stadium in San Diego, the Chargers relocated back to Los Angeles, becoming co-tenants with the Rams at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. The move angered much of their original fan base, and the team has struggled to build a strong following. However, with young quarterback Justin Herbert leading the charge and one of the most talented rosters in football, the Chargers are once again positioned to compete. New England Patriots, founded 1960. The franchise that would become the New England Patriots started modestly in 1960 as the Boston Patriots, a founding member of the AFL. Their original home field, Nickerson Field, followed by a nomadic stretch playing games at venues like Fenway Park, Harvard Stadium, and Boston College. The team's original logo, Pat Patriot, a Revolutionary War soldier hiking a football, was voted on by fans and captured the local identity. But success on the field was hard to come by. The Patriots reached just one AFL championship game in the league's 10-year history and lost badly to the Chargers in 1963. By 1971, after years of subpar stadiums and inconsistent play, the franchise rebranded as the New England Patriots and moved to a new stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts. It was an effort to expand the fan base beyond Boston and finally give the team a permanent home. For the next 2 decades, the Patriots were a middle-of-the-pack franchise. They reached Super Bowl 20 in 1985 under head coach Raymond Berry, only to be steamrolled by the Chicago Bears' legendary defense. The 1990s brought even more inconsistency, until a series of events in the early 2000s would alter the course of NFL history. In 2000, the Patriots hired Bill Belichick as head coach, and in the 6th round of that same draft, they selected an unheralded quarterback out of Michigan, Tom Brady. 1 year later, Brady stepped in for injured starter Drew Bledsoe and never looked back. Under Belichick and Brady, the Patriots began a dynasty unmatched in modern football. From Tuck Rule games to Spygate, Deflategate, and the 28-3 comeback against the Falcons, the Patriots became the NFL's most talked about team, revered by some and hated by others. New York Jets, founded 1960. The team we now know as the New York Jets began its life in 1960 as the New York Titans, one of the 8 original members of the American Football League. At the time, they played in the old Polo Grounds, sharing the city with the far more established New York Giants, and trying desperately to find their footing. The Titans were underfunded, chaotic, and barely holding on financially. Players often practiced in public parks, and team operations were so unstable that players occasionally went unpaid. After just 3 seasons, the AFL stepped in and forced the sale of the team. That sale in 1963 changed everything. A new ownership group rebranded the team as the New York Jets, chose a green and white color scheme, and moved to Shea Stadium in Queens, right next to LaGuardia Airport. The name Jets was chosen to reflect the modern, high-flying image of the jet age and their new stadium's proximity to aviation. In 1965, the Jets made the boldest move in AFL history. They signed Joe Namath, a flashy, confident quarterback out of Alabama, to a then-record $427,000 contract. Namath became the face of the AFL and turned the Jets into must-watch TV. Then came the moment that put the AFL and the Jets into football lore. In 1969, Namath and the Jets upset the heavily favored Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III. It was the AFL's first Super Bowl win, and Namath famously guaranteed victory days before the game. That win not only changed the Jets' legacy, but forced the NFL to respect the AFL as a legitimate league, paving the way for the AFL-NFL merger. But after that shining moment, success became fleeting. The Jets have struggled for most of their post-merger history, plagued by quarterback instability, front office turnover, and postseason droughts. They've had brief flashes, like the Mark Sanchez-led AFC Championship runs in 2009 and 2010, but have not returned to the Super Bowl since Namath's iconic win. Tennessee Titans, founded 1960. The Tennessee Titans story begins not in Nashville, but in Houston, Texas. They were one of the founding franchises of the American Football League in 1960, originally known as the Houston Oilers, and they were immediate winners. The Oilers won the very first 2 AFL championships in 1960 and 1961. They played their early home games in Yepesen Stadium, and their oil derrick logo quickly became one of the most recognizable in football. For much of their early existence, the Oilers were known for offensive firepower and passionate fans. In the late 70s and early 80s, the team developed a blue-collar identity under head coach Bum Phillips and running back Earl Campbell, who powered through defenders like a freight train. In the late 1980s and early 90s, the Oilers evolved into a high-flying team with quarterback Warren Moon, who helped popularize the run-and-shoot offense. They made the playoffs in 7 consecutive seasons, but never broke through to the Super Bowl. Their most infamous moment? The 1993 AFC wildcard game, where they blew a 32-point lead to the Bills, still the largest comeback in NFL history. Frustrated by stadium disputes and a lack of public support in Houston, owner Bud Adams decided to relocate the franchise to Tennessee. In 1997, the team played as the Tennessee Oilers, first in Memphis and then in Nashville. But the name never quite fit the new location. By 1999, the franchise was officially rebranded as the Tennessee Titans, a name chosen to evoke power, tradition, and regional pride. That same year, they moved into their new home, Adelphia Coliseum, now Nissan Stadium, and made a storybook run to Super Bowl 34. That Super Bowl ended in heartbreak. The Titans came up 1 yard short of forcing overtime in one of the most dramatic endings in NFL history. Since then, the Titans have remained competitive, with multiple playoff appearances, stars like Steve McNair, Eddie George, Chris Johnson, and Derrick Henry, and a tough, physical brand of football. Minnesota Vikings, founded 1961. The Minnesota Vikings weren't supposed to be an NFL team at all, at least not originally. In the late 1950s, a group of Minneapolis businessmen, led by Max Winter, secured rights to a franchise in the rival American Football League. But just before launching, they were approached by the NFL with a better offer: join the established league as an expansion franchise. The owners jumped at the chance, withdrew from the AFL, and in 1960 the Minnesota Vikings were officially born, set to begin play the following year. The name Vikings was chosen to reflect the region's strong Scandinavian heritage, a nod to Minnesota's large population of Nordic immigrants and its tough, rugged climate. From day one, the franchise leaned into that identity: cold weather, grit, and battle-tested football. The Vikings played their first season in 1961 and made an immediate splash by defeating the Chicago Bears in their debut game behind rookie quarterback Fran Tarkenton, who threw 4 touchdown passes. Though the team struggled early on, Tarkenton's arrival marked the beginning of a new era. In 1967, the Vikings hired Bud Grant, a no-nonsense coach who had dominated in the CFL. Under Grant, Minnesota became one of the most disciplined and physically imposing teams of the 1970s. The Purple People Eaters defensive line, led by Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and Gary Larson, became the backbone of a dominant era. From 1969 to 1976, the Vikings made 4 Super Bowl appearances, but heartbreak followed them. They lost each time, unable to capture the elusive title. Still, they became synonymous with postseason excellence and toughness. Despite decades of coming close, the Vikings have yet to win a Super Bowl, but they've remained one of the most consistently competitive teams in the NFL. Atlanta Falcons, founded 1966. The Atlanta Falcons were born out of a bidding war between 2 leagues and became the NFL's first team in the Deep South. In the mid-1960s, the NFL and the AFL were aggressively expanding, racing to plant their flags in untapped markets. Atlanta, one of the fastest-growing cities in the country, became a prime target. Businessman Rankin Smith, an executive with the Life Insurance Company of Georgia, originally planned to purchase an AFL franchise, but the NFL didn't want to lose ground in a city that had just opened the brand new Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, so they stepped in fast. NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle offered Smith an expansion franchise, and to sweeten the deal, gave him exclusive NFL rights to the entire Southeast. Smith accepted, and in 1965, the Atlanta Falcons were officially awarded. The name Falcons was chosen through a fan contest. The winner, a local school teacher, said the Falcon was proud and dignified, with great courage and fight. That spirit would define the team's identity, even through decades of growing pains. Atlanta's early years were tough. The team didn't record a winning season until 1971, and only made the playoffs once in its first 12 years. In 1998, led by quarterback Chris Chandler, running back Jamal Anderson, and the legendary Dirty Bird celebration, the Falcons shocked the league by going 14-2 and reaching Super Bowl 33. Though they lost to Denver, it marked a turning point. In the 2000s and 2010s, with stars like Michael Vick, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Roddy White, the Falcons became regular contenders. They reached Super Bowl 51 in 2016, only to suffer one of the most infamous collapses in sports history. Miami Dolphins, Founded 1966. They were founded by lawyer and politician Joe Robbie and entertainer Danny Thomas, who were awarded an AFL expansion team set to begin play in 1966. At the time, Miami was known more for beaches than football, and many doubted whether a pro team could succeed in a city with no tradition of cold-weather gridiron grit. But the Dolphins didn't just survive, they built a legacy. In their early years, the Dolphins struggled. They wore bright aqua and orange, played in the Orange Bowl, and lost a lot of games. But things changed quickly after the AFL-NFL merger, especially with the hiring of head coach Don Shula in 1970. Shula had already made a name for himself with the Baltimore Colts, and his arrival instantly transformed the Dolphins. He emphasized discipline, fundamentals, and physicality. The turnaround was almost immediate. By 1971, the Dolphins reached their first Super Bowl. By 1972, they made history. That year, Miami went a perfect 14-0 in the regular season, then won all 3 of their playoff games, including Super Bowl VII, to become the only team in NFL history to finish a season undefeated. The 1972 Dolphins went 17-0, a feat that has never been matched. They followed it with another Super Bowl win in 1973. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the Dolphins remained a contender, thanks largely to the brilliance of quarterback Dan Marino. Drafted in 1983, Marino shattered passing records with his quick release and cannon arm. Though he never won a Super Bowl, he helped turn the Dolphins into a glamorous, must-watch franchise. New Orleans Saints, founded 1967. The New Orleans Saints were born on a day that felt almost scripted. November 1st, 1966, All Saints' Day. It was a poetic coincidence that helped inspire the team's name, linking it forever with the city's deep Catholic roots, jazz heritage, and cultural flair. New Orleans had been lobbying for a professional football team for years. The city already had a rich sporting tradition and a population passionate about college football. When the NFL and AFL announced their merger in the mid-1960s, Congress insisted on expanding the league to new markets. That pressure helped fast-track New Orleans into the NFL. The franchise was awarded to businessman John W. Mecom Jr., and the team was officially introduced in 1967. Their black and gold colors symbolize the region's ties to oil, black gold, and wealth, while their fleur-de-lis logo drew directly from French heritage and the city's European influence. But while the Saints' branding was iconic from the start, their play on the field was anything but. New Orleans became known as the lovable losers of the league. In fact, it took 20 seasons before the Saints had their first winning record, not until 1987. The team's early years were marked by heartbreak, bizarre moments, and devoted fans who showed up week after week, even when many jokingly wore paper bags over their heads, calling themselves the Aints. But the true transformation came in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The Superdome was severely damaged, and the franchise was temporarily relocated. Many questioned whether the Saints would ever return. Then came 2006. New head coach Sean Payton, quarterback Drew Brees, and a rejuvenated city rallied around each other. The Saints returned to New Orleans that season and made the NFC Championship, just 1 year after devastation. 3 years later, in 2009, they completed the dream, winning Super Bowl 44 and delivering the city its first championship. Cincinnati Bengals, founded 1968. The Cincinnati Bengals were founded as part of a strategic master plan, one created by Paul Brown, one of the most legendary figures in football history. By the late 1960s, Paul Brown had already done it all. He had founded and coached the Cleveland Browns, revolutionized the game with film study, playbooks, and organized coaching staffs, and won multiple championships. But after being controversially fired by the Browns in 1963, he wasn't done with football. He was just getting started, again. When the AFL announced its final expansion team before the merger with the NFL, Browns saw an opening. A new franchise was awarded to Cincinnati in 1967, set to begin play in 1968, and Paul Brown was placed in charge as both part owner and head coach. The name Bengals was chosen as a tribute to a previous pro team from the city in the 1930s. But it also gave the new franchise a strong, fierce identity. The Bengals began play in the American Football League in 1968 and transitioned to the NFL with the 1970 merger. Despite being a new team, they were competitive quickly. Brown's experience and eye for talent gave Cincinnati a massive advantage. In 1970, their first year in the NFL, the Bengals won their division and made the playoffs. A decade later, they became one of the most exciting teams in football under head coach Forrest Gregg and quarterback Ken Anderson, reaching Super Bowl 16 in the 1981 season. Though they lost to Joe Montana's 49ers, the Bengals were now a serious contender. The next few decades brought inconsistency and disappointment, a stretch known painfully by fans as the Bungles era. But everything changed with the arrival of Joe Burrow in 2020. With Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and a rebuilt defense, the Bengals made a stunning Super Bowl run in the 2021 season, falling just short against the Rams, but proving Cincinnati was back among the NFL's elite. Seattle Seahawks, founded 1976. In the 1970s, the NFL was expanding its footprint, and Seattle, a booming port city with no pro football team, emerged as a top target. The league awarded an expansion franchise to a group of Seattle businessmen led by Lloyd W. Nordstrom, the department store heir, in 1974. The team would begin play in 1976, along with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The name Seahawks was chosen through a public contest. Out of over 20,000 submissions, Seahawks was selected for its regional relevance and aggressive tone. The name perfectly fit the Pacific Northwest's rugged coastal identity. The Seahawks played their first season at the Kingdom, a concrete dome that echoed with noise and quickly earned a reputation as one of the loudest stadiums in football. The team struggled early on, but by the early 1980s, they were turning heads with young talent and a passionate fan base that would soon become legendary. Seattle's early stars included wide receiver Steve Largent, who would go on to become one of the greatest pass catchers in NFL history. Under head coach Chuck Knox, the Seahawks reached their first AFC championship game in 1983, led by a tough defense and bruising running backs like Kurt Warner. After bouncing between ups and downs for decades, and even switching conferences from the AFC to the NFC in 2002 due to realignment, the franchise's true rise came under head coach Pete Carroll. By the early 2010s, the Seahawks had built one of the NFL's most dominant defenses, nicknamed the Legion of Boom. With stars like Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and Bobby Wagner, paired with the electric, undersized quarterback Russell Wilson and powerhouse running back Marshawn Lynch, the Seahawks became an unstoppable force. In 2013, they reached the pinnacle, dominating the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 48 to win their first championship in franchise history. They returned the next year, but fell in heartbreaking fashion to the Patriots after throwing the ball on the 1-yard line instead of giving it to Lynch, a decision still debated today. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, founded 1976. Awarded as part of the same 1976 expansion that birthed the Seattle Seahawks, the Buccaneers became the first NFL franchise based in Florida. The team was founded by wealthy businessman Hugh Culverhouse, who saw opportunity in the rapidly growing Tampa Bay area, a region passionate about football, but with no pro team to support. The Bucs' name was inspired by Florida's pirate history, particularly the legend surrounding the pirate Jose Gaspar, who was said to have prowled the Gulf Coast. The team's original mascot, Buccaneer Bruce, and their creamsicle orange uniforms quickly became iconic, and, at times, infamous. Their early seasons were brutal. The Buccaneers lost their first 26 games, setting an NFL record for futility. First head coach John McKay, known for his dry wit, once responded to a question about his team's execution by saying, "I'm in favor of it." But things turned around faster than expected. By 1979, just 3 seasons after their first win, the Buccaneers made the NFC Championship game, led by a ferocious defense starring Leroy Selman and a solid run game behind Ricky Bell. Tampa had gone from laughingstock to contender. Unfortunately, success didn't last. The 1980s and early 1990s were filled with instability, poor drafts, and endless coaching changes. The team became synonymous with losing, until everything changed in the late 90s. Under head coach Tony Dungy, the Buccaneers built one of the NFL's most feared defenses. With stars like Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, John Lynch, and Rondé Barber, they laid the foundation for a winning culture. But it was John Gruden, hired in 2002, who brought it all together. In Super Bowl 37, the Buccaneers demolished the Oakland Raiders with a legendary defensive performance, claiming their first championship. Tampa had finally reached the mountaintop with defense, swagger, and redemption. Fast forward to 2020, and history repeated itself in even grander fashion. The Bucs signed Tom Brady, assembled a veteran-heavy roster, and won Super Bowl 55 in their own stadium, the first team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl at home. Carolina Panthers, founded 1995. Awarded in 1993 and beginning play in 1995, the Panthers were the result of businessman Jerry Richardson's decade-long campaign to bring professional football to the Carolinas. Richardson, a former NFL player turned fast food magnate, pitched the NFL a vision of a regional franchise, one that would unite North and South Carolina under a single team. Charlotte, North Carolina, was chosen as the home base. It was a city on the rise, with growing corporate power and sports potential. The team was initially based at Clemson University's Memorial Stadium, while their new home, Bank of America Stadium, was being built in downtown Charlotte. From the beginning, the Panthers did something unheard of for an expansion team. They won. Under head coach Dom Capers, Carolina finished their second season in 1996 with a 12-4 record, winning the NFC West and advancing all the way to the NFC Championship game. It was the fastest rise to prominence in NFL history at the time, and it instantly put the Panthers on the map. The early stars included linebacker Sam Mills, who coined the team's enduring slogan, "Keep Pounding," a mantra that still echoes through the stadium every Sunday. In 2003, they reached Super Bowl 38, narrowly losing to the New England Patriots in one of the most competitive Super Bowls ever played. The next decade brought another defining era, the Cam Newton years. Drafted first overall in 2011, Newton electrified the league with his size, speed, and charisma. In 2015, they went 15-1, steamrolling their way to Super Bowl 50. Newton won NFL MVP, and Carolina became the face of the league for a season. But once again, the story ended in Super Bowl heartbreak, this time to the Denver Broncos. Jacksonville Jaguars, founded 1995. The Jacksonville Jaguars were one of the biggest surprises in NFL expansion history, a small market team that beat out bigger cities and quickly became competitive on the field. In the early 1990s, the NFL was looking to expand, and cities like St. Louis, Baltimore, and Memphis were considered frontrunners. But in a major upset, Jacksonville, Florida, a mid-sized city with no major professional sports team, was awarded a franchise in 1993, set to begin play in 1995 alongside the Carolina Panthers. The team was founded by Wayne Weaver, a businessman from the shoe industry, and he pushed hard to convince the league that Jacksonville could support an NFL team. His pitch worked, and when the announcement was made, many around the league were stunned. The Jaguars debuted in 1995 under head coach Tom Coughlin, who had total control of football operations. Expectations were modest. Most expansion teams take years to build, but Jacksonville broke the mold. By 1996, in just their second season, the Jaguars shocked the league by going 9-7 and making the playoffs. Even more shocking, they upset the Buffalo Bills and Denver Broncos on the road to reach the AFC Championship game. It was one of the most improbable playoff runs ever for such a young team. But after that early burst of success, the 2000s were more difficult. The team struggled with roster turnover, coaching changes, and declining attendance. Then came a resurgence in 2017, led by a fearsome defense nicknamed Saxonville. Featuring Jalen Ramsey and Calais Campbell, the Jaguars made a run all the way to the AFC Championship game, nearly taking down the Patriots in Foxborough. Today, with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and Doug Peterson as head coach, Jacksonville is once again building something special. Baltimore Ravens, founded 1996. The Baltimore Ravens weren't born like most NFL franchises. They were ripped from the heart of another city, the result of one of the most controversial moves in league history. In the mid-1990s, Baltimore had been without an NFL team for over a decade, ever since the Colts packed up and left for Indianapolis in the middle of the night in 1984. The city had tried everything to get a team back, including failed bids for expansion. But their second chance came not through the league, but through relocation. In 1996, Cleveland Browns owner Art Modell shocked the football world by announcing he would move the Browns to Baltimore. The backlash was instant. Cleveland fans were furious, the NFL was under pressure, and lawsuits flew from every direction. The compromise? Cleveland would get to keep the Browns' name, colors, and history. Modell would move the players, coaches, and front office to Baltimore, but they would become an entirely new franchise, the Baltimore Ravens. The name Ravens was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, the famous poet who lived and died in Baltimore, and whose iconic poem, The Raven, became a symbol of the city's literary legacy. From the start, the Ravens built their identity on defense. In 1996, they drafted Jonathan Ogden, a Hall of Fame left tackle, and Ray Lewis, a linebacker, who would become the heart and soul of the franchise. Over the next few years, they added more defensive legends like Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs, crafting one of the greatest units the game has ever seen. By 2000, that defense reached historic levels. The Ravens allowed just 165 points in the entire regular season, the fewest ever in a 16-game season, and rode that dominance to a blowout win in Super Bowl 35, crushing the New York Giants. They would win another Super Bowl in 2012 in the final season of Ray Lewis's legendary career. This time, they were led by quarterback Joe Flacco, who put together a flawless playoff run. In recent years, Baltimore has continued to innovate. In 2018, they drafted quarterback Lamar Jackson, whose electrifying speed and unique play style earned him NFL MVP. Once again, the Ravens had a star and a new era. Houston Texans, founded 2002. The Houston Texans are the youngest franchise in the NFL, but their creation filled a void left by heartbreak. For decades, Houston was home to the Oilers, a proud AFL original team known for stars like Earl Campbell, Warren Moon, and one of the most passionate fan bases in football. But in 1997, after years of stadium issues and declining attendance, the Oilers moved to Tennessee, becoming the Titans. The city was stunned. Houston, a football-mad town, was suddenly without a team. That didn't last long. Enter Bob McNair, a billionaire businessman with a vision. Determined to bring football back to Houston, McNair led a successful bid for an expansion franchise, beating out cities like Los Angeles. The NFL officially awarded Houston a new team in 1999, set to begin play in 2002. The name Texans was chosen to reflect state pride, a tribute to the identity and culture of Texas itself. The team's bull logo, star emblem, and red, white, and blue color scheme all emphasized that this was more than just a football team. It was a Texas brand. The Texans played their first game on September 8, 2002, and made an immediate statement, upsetting the Dallas Cowboys in their franchise debut. Early years were rocky. The team struggled to find stability and suffered through multiple losing seasons. But the pieces started to come together in the late 2000s. The Texans drafted Andre Johnson, a dominant wide receiver, and later found their franchise pass rusher in J.J. Watt, who would go on to win 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Under head coach Gary Kubiak and later Bill O'Brien, Houston became a playoff regular in the 2010s. With Watt anchoring the defense and stars like Arian Foster and DeAndre Hopkins on offense, the Texans built a strong identity. In 2017, they drafted quarterback Deshaun Watson, who added explosive playmaking to their offense and helped lead multiple playoff runs. But turmoil followed, a series of off-field controversies, front office instability, and years of roster mismanagement set the team back. Now, with C.J. Stroud at quarterback and DeMeco Ryans as head coach, the Texans are entering a new era. Stroud's breakout rookie season and the team's rapid turnaround have reignited hope in Houston, proving that even the NFL's youngest team can build something special, fast. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.